The story begins with Hinagi telling Yukito that she was dating somebody else. What a great way to start this story, right? Yukito mustered all his courage to speak to the love of his life, Suzurikawa Hinagi, determined to confess his love. With a stiff posture, he told her they've known each other since childhood, and she has always been special to him. However, after being dumped, Yukito suddenly clenched his fist and ran away without warning, leaving Hinagi dumbfounded. As he kept running, memories of Hinagi flashed in his mind. He always thought their feelings were mutual, and now, after hearing the harsh truth, nothing made sense anymore. With tears on his cheeks, Yukito wished to disappear. Shoyu High School Year 1 Class B. That was the class Yukito was in. It was the first day of school, which meant it was time for introductions, the most crucial day of Yukito's life. A girl named Sakurai Kana was called, introducing herself enthusiastically. As Yukito perceived the girl as the sunny type, he was also deciding on which personality he should showcase for his introduction. Next, a girl named Shakadu Anya sprung from her seat, randomly sharing that she liked bugs. Weird flex, but okay. As Yukito thought this girl was a bit gloomy, he was also contemplating where he should make a low-key or unforgettable debut. Finally, this raging sociopath of an MC had decided he wouldn't take a big risk. He will be the average, harmless, and gloomy character. He will go with the forgettable yet easy-to-go-by persona. Bro's trying to be different so hard, it's just cringe. When it was finally his turn to introduce himself, Yukito wasted no time to deliver his nonchalant speech. Just then, he thanked everyone for taking care of him because now, he was gonna quit school. Everyone was left with their mouths gaping wide, unable to process what the class weirdo just said. Yukito realized he wasn't as forgettable as he had hoped, and now everyone thought of him as an oddball. Instead of being embarrassed, he was rather understanding, accepting the fact that what he did was actually weird. At least this guy is self-aware. The teacher, who called him by his last name, Kokonoe, asked what the hell just happened. Yukito simply shrugged, apologizing for his one-of-a-kind introduction. He claimed that the word was unreasonable, leading him to think that going to school was pointless. Although confused, the teacher was left with no choice but to accept the young man's point of view. Despite the banger intro, Yukito wasn't done. He continued speaking, introducing his full name and his goal of being the gloomy guy who was always alone. On most days, he would pretend to be asleep so he would appreciate it if everyone treated him like he didn't exist. He wouldn't even mind if everyone verbally attacked him, saying things like he was disgusting and undiagnosed with a mental health disorder. Well, that won't even matter because Yukito was convinced that no one would want to talk to a gloomy character like him. Everybody was too stunned to speak, making Yukito think he had done a good job. Definitely no one would talk to him now. However, the teacher, Fujishiro, suddenly exclaimed that he shouldn't waste his high school life like that, as she was more than willing to lend him a hand. Yukito thought the teacher was overly nice and he refused her offer. He also reassured her that his high school life wasn't the only thing he had wasted. Fujishiro was surprised, and she was slightly creeped out by the young man's realistic mindset. She then told him to sit down, noting that she was now aware of Yukito being a problem child. The rest of the class burst into laughter while Yukito argued that he was just being modest. This made Fujishiro laugh harder, leaving Yukito confused. His introduction was totally normal. He tried asking his seatmate for validation, but the latter only replied that whatever that was, the school year would definitely be fun with him around. Yukito's seatmate called him by his first name and handed him his phone, asking to exchange contacts. Yukito, on the other hand, was surprised to be treated so casually. He called his seatmate Tanaka, who then called him out because he had just introduced himself as Mihu Kuki. Yukito apologized for his mistake, reasoning that he wasn't listening. However, a more important matter crossed his mind. Why the heck was this guy even talking to a gloomy person like him? Yukito flashed this question to Mihu, and he replied that he was rather unique than gloomy. Mihu didn't care. He just wanted to become friends with Yukito. However, at the back of Yukito's mind, he believes that Mihu just wanted him to be his errand boy. By placing a gloomy guy like him on Mihu's side, his handsomeness will shine more. But on the bright side, a self-centered guy was easier to deal with than someone who had a poker face. Mihu, noticing that Yukito was internally pissed, noted that he looked like he was cursing him in his mind. Just then, Yukito pulled out some cash from his wallet, asking if a friend's task was to give money. Surprised by his understanding of friendship, Mihu asked him what traumatic experience he had in the past. This guy totally needs to touch grass. Mihu told Yukito to close his wallet and the latter obliged, suddenly becoming docile. Despite being weirded out, Mihu flashed a smile, noting that he would be in Yukito's care from now on. He then asked Yukito if he was free after school. Just then, Sakurai Kana suggested that they do karaoke since they are all classmates now. She then asked Yukito if he wanted to come, making him overthink the whole situation. They were finally at the point where they would gather as classmates to get to know each other better. Yukito thought that Sakurai-kana was the sunniest of the sunny characters, which would mean that she was his strongest rival. He knew he'd have to deal with this problem, so he immediately came up with a strategy. With a demure gesture, he claimed that Sakurai was a queen, and he insisted on calling her Elizabeth. This left the girl confused as her name was far from what Yukito was suggesting. Just then, Yukito expressed his disbelief at being invited, so Sakurai explained that Mihu vouched for him, claiming that he wasn't weird. Hearing this, Yukito gazed at the other students who were going, and he saw a mix of hesitant and excited faces. Just then, he slammed his palms on the desk, apologizing to Sakurai for not being able to come. He reasoned that he had something to tend to, leaving Sakurai no choice but to respect his wishes. As Yukito made his way to the door, Sakurai yelled that she would love for him to come next time. As Yukito left, he thought that he wasn't exactly lying because he really had to go home and make dinner for his mother. On top of that, hanging around with those girls was just a disaster waiting to happen. He thought about Suzurikawa Hinagi and how she was in a relationship. He wouldn't want to be the one to cause any issues. Imagine joining a most delusional contest and you're up against this guy. Then there's Kamishiro Shiori, the most innocent person Yukito has ever seen. Being with her just seemed off, and it looked like she was uncomfortable whenever he was around. Yukito was sure that those two girls were bothered by his presence. That was why, when he saw their names in the name list, he vowed to stay away from them. However, fate had a different plan, and they were ironically put in the same class. Elsewhere, the rest of the class had a blast in the karaoke bar. Their conversation shifted to Yukito, and they wondered what his deal was. One of the guys claimed he was bad news as no one would quit school on their first day. Just then, Mihu joined the conversation saying that Yukito was just an interesting guy. When asked about his relationship with Yukito, Mihu explained that they used to play basketball in middle school, but they were on opposite teams and doubted that he still remembered. Curious, Kamishiro Shiori asked if Mihu ever had a match with Yukito back in middle school, and he confirmed it. Mihu was surprised that Kamishiro knew about this, so he asked if she knew why he didn't show up at the tournament. Just then, Kamishiro abruptly shifted her gaze, saying that she couldn't talk about it. Overhearing the gossip, one of the girls asked if she was good friends with Yukito, but she said it was the opposite. She was certain that Yukito hated her. Back in the summer of their second year, Kamishiro had a major interest in Yukito. Their club wasn't that committed to their activities, so the girls and boys took it upon themselves to have fun. Kamishiro joined in, but Yukito caught her eye. It was like he was possessed, and he kept shooting the ball with utmost determination. It was as if he was trying to prove or forget something. Yukito's efforts summoned the passion and commitment the club never had, and with him, they could have aimed for a high spot at the tournament. Because of that, the club got fired up. Back then, Kamishiro thought of him as the greatest person ever. He was able to change and influence people by just being himself. However, he never took care of himself, so she took the role. Soon enough, she noticed that she was falling for him. But she was just a kid back then, and she couldn't be honest with her feelings. Because of that, she confessed to him despite being unsure. Being immature, she ended up betraying him in the most hideous way. Bro, this girl needs a trip to the psych ward. Looking back at it now, Kamishiro was sure that she caused Yukito's oddness. Suddenly, Kamishiro unexpectedly gazed into Hinagi's eyes, causing her to get defensive. Hinagi stood from her seat, angrily saying that she was hearing things. She asked Kamishiro to repeat her story, but the latter wasn't buying it. She interrogated Hinagi for her hostile reaction, demanding to know what was up between her and Yukito. Two of the girls in the group were quick to pick up on the tense atmosphere. The place was suddenly turning into an arena, which didn't make sense because Kamishiro and Hinagi were supposed to be friends because they came from the same middle school. Just then, Hinagi shared that she was Kamishiro's childhood friend. Kamishiro furiously asked if she caused Yukito to change, and Hinagi regrettably admitted it. However, she suddenly got enraged, asking Kamishiro to disclose what she actually did to Yukito. As the situation escalated, Sakurai stepped in, pulling the girls apart before they decided to tear each other's faces. She reminded the girls that they were in a get-together, so they should be getting along. The others, feeling trapped in the moment, just tried smiling to hide their awkwardness. Just then, Hinagi took her bag and headed to the door, claiming that she was leaving. Meanwhile, Kamishiro apologized for ruining the moment, and she excused herself to go home. After the two left, the rest of the group was finally able to breathe. To feel better, they urged the guy named Kazunari to start singing, and he immediately got into action. Mihu, on the other hand, was still baffled by Yukito's backstory. That night, Yukito was on the hot seat for his unhinged introduction. His sister Yuri was furious because of what he did. He couldn't even go ahead and eat dinner because Yuri was busy interrogating him. This led Yukito to believe that someone was spying on him because word of his outrageous introduction reached her ears. As Yukito took a bite of his dry food, Yuri suddenly asked if he purposely embarrassed himself to avoid Hinagi and Kamishiro. However, Yukito sighed, merely saying that he had no comments. Yuri suddenly gave him a death stare, causing Yukito to admit the truth. He knew his sister heard about Hinagi, his childhood friend, but it turned out that she also knew Kamishiro. Suddenly, Yukito stood from his seat, claiming that he had to go study. Sensing he was upset, Yuki asked if he was okay. Yukito said he was fine and then went straight to his room. As he plopped on his bed, he felt bad for being rude to his sister. Could it be that she actually cared about him? That would be impossible because Yuri hated his guts. Meanwhile, Yuri slammed her fist on the table, angrily asking why Yukito was always the one suffering. She wanted her brother to have a bright high school life, but nothing changed at all. Both Suzurikawa Hinagi and Kamishiro Shiori were useless little rats in her eyes, and for that she will never forgive them. Based on the look on her brother's face, Yuki was sure that Yukito still hated her. He would never speak to her unless it was for practical reasons, and she knew this wasn't a normal sibling dynamic. But she couldn't blame him because she caused it in the first place. Ever since that fateful day, he never called her his sister ever again. Yuki slowly wrapped her arms around herself for comfort, accepting the fact that Yukito would always hate her. Even so, she will protect him from Kamishiro and Hinagi. The next day at school, Kamishiro and Hinagi tried catching Yukito's attention. Kamishiro asked if he was joining the basketball club, and then she mentioned that he was planning to become the club's manager. Hinagi, on the other hand, asked Yukito if he wanted to have lunch with her in the cafeteria. Yukito was more confused than ever, making him ask God why he kept sending him trials. Yukito had always been unlucky with women. His own mother neglected him, his sister hated him, his childhood friends who he assumed liked him had a boyfriend right before his confession, and he got bullied during his heartbreak phase. All his troubles stacked up, and the most obvious one was his relationship with women. With all his dilemma, Yukito theorized that he must have been a reincarnator from another world who got killed after defying evil. After that, he was born into this world with bad karma. Maybe that was why he couldn't build deep bonds with people and he couldn't even show empathy towards them. It was all too overwhelming, so he gave up on even trying to understand why. But right now, it seemed like the whole world had turned upside down. Why the heck were Hinagi and Kamishiro fighting over him? Kamishiro asked Hinagi if she could talk to Yukito later, as she was the first to speak to him. However, Hinagi stood her ground, suggesting that she spoke with Yukito after they had lunch. As the girls bickered, Yukito was caught in a crisis because he didn't even want to talk to either of them. He only wanted to be left alone, and he could only wish these girls would fight somewhere else. Just then, Mihu asked Yukito which club he planned to join. The girls suddenly fell silent while Yukito flashed a frustrated look at Mihu, pointing out how his question just made the situation worse. Kamishiro suddenly appeared before Yukito, urging him to join the basketball team. She will be the manager, and this time she will commit to the role. Thinking about basketball brought back a lot of bad memories for Yukito. He gave his all, but what he got in return was disappointment. He didn't even reach his goals, and he got nothing out of it. Because of this, he bluntly told Kamishiro that he no longer played basketball. However, Kamishiro remained relentless, refusing to accept his answer. Afraid that Yukito's mind was made up, she slammed her hands on his desk, reminding him that he tried so hard. Just then, Yukito told her she knew what happened best after he poured all his effort. This comment made Kamishiro cry, and she mustered all her courage to say a cohesive response. Yukito coldly asked her how long she was going to pity him, making her feel worse. As Kamishiro panicked, Yukito suddenly concluded the pity party, casually declaring that he didn't have plans to join the club anyway. He was a gloomy guy and his only club option was to go home. Disappointed, Mihu urged Yukito to reconsider, but his mind was made up. Just then, Yukito headed to the door, informing everyone that he was going to the cafeteria. Kamishiro called him, but Yukito didn't give her time to explain and only wished her luck in being the manager. Kamishiro noticed the coldness in his voice as he no longer called her name like he used to. "Girl, do you still expect to be called Sugar Pie Honey Bunch?" As Yukito headed for the cafeteria, he noticed that the baseball club was still having afternoon practices. He used to practice like crazy back then, but now he felt nothing when he touched the ball. He just lost the energy for it, and he believed he would never play like he used to. However, there was no point in dwelling on the past, so he pulled himself together and continued walking. When he returned to the classroom, Hinagi suddenly approached him, asking if he wanted to eat with her. She was down for a hunger strike if it meant eating with this nerd. Yukito was dumbfounded, and he couldn't believe that she was waiting for him to come back. Just then he burst Hinagi's bubble, bluntly telling her that she should stop talking to him. Hinagi stuttered, reminding him that they were classmates and childhood friends. However, this didn't count to Yukito, and he claimed it was all in the past. When Hinagi asked him why he would say this, Yukito coldly replied that he would feel bad for her boyfriend. Yukito's words hit Hinagi like a bolt of lightning, drawing the attention of everyone around them. Her middle school boyfriend was well known, and exposing that part of her past in front of their classmates was like tearing open an old wound. Hinagi was on the verge of tears and she asked Yukito to just forget about the past. However, Yukito replied that he was only being mindful, as he wouldn't want his girlfriend to be chummy with another girl. They were childhood friends, so tension was to be expected. Hinagi tried explaining, but Yukito reminded her that he had to distance himself when she had a boyfriend. He didn't understand why Hinagi struggled to get the idea. Yes, they were childhood friends, but this didn't mean they could be together forever. Just then, Yukito decided to leave, coldly telling Hinagi to have lunch with someone else. As he walked away, he was reminded of how he let her go because he wished her the best. Now he was left wondering if he still felt the same way about her. As soon as Yukito walked out, murmurs filled the classroom. Some students groaned in disappointment, lamenting their lost chances with Hinagi, while others shrugged. After all, someone as stunning as her was bound to be taken. When one of them curiously asked who the lucky guy was, another eagerly leaned in, ready to spill the secret. But before the words could leave their lips, Hinagi snapped. Her voice cut through the chatter like a blade, demanding everyone to shut up. Silence fell as she trembled, her expression crumbling. Then without warning, tears welled up in her eyes. Her voice broke as she choked out that everything was her fault. Later that day, the teacher announced that the class would be having an outdoor lesson the next day, an annual event designed to strengthen friendships through a hiking trip. As soon as the teacher instructed them to form groups of 4, the room buzzed with excitement. Yukito, however, let out an exhausted sigh, already predicting the outcome. As expected, everyone quickly paired off, leaving him untouched like an unwanted dirty sock. The teacher, now practically begging someone to take him in, scanned the room for volunteers. Most people would have been mortified by the rejection, but Yukito only leaned back in satisfaction. If anything, this was proof that his brooding lone wolf persona was finally taking effect. However, before Yukito could fully revel in his success, Mihu suddenly appeared before him, flashing a charming smile that could make panties drop. Without hesitation, Mihu declared that he wanted to team up with Yukito, leaving the latter momentarily dazed by the sheer power of Mihu's lethal face card. Yukito quickly snapped out of it and attempted to push Mihu away, casually insisting that someone as bright and cheerful as him shouldn't be grouping up with equally sunny people. Mihu, of course, wasn't having it, and the two soon found themselves in a back-and-forth argument. Unbeknownst to them, 2 figures loomed behind them, listening intently. Hinagi and Kamishiro, seemingly unfazed by the ongoing bickering, had already made up their minds. They were forcing their way into this group whether Yukito liked it or not. The following day, the class arrived at their destination. As soon as they got off the bus, Yukito strayed away from the group, leaving Mihu confused. Just then, he called out to the mountains, saying, "Tartarus!" Everybody was weirded out by Yukito's randomness, while Mihu commented that he could never top his friend's humor. Suddenly, Hinagi and Kamishiro appeared, forcing Yukito to keep his distance. Later on, the hike began, and Yukito made sure that he never interacted with the girls. Mihu tried to ease the awkwardness by speaking to him, but Yukito barely replied. Yukito suddenly gazed at the girls, wondering why they paired up with him when they could have just teamed up with their friends. He started to worry, thinking that he would ruin their high school lives. Just then, Hinagi accidentally sprained her ankle, forcing everyone to take a break. Yukito approached her, ambiguously telling her to take them off. Everyone was shocked by his command, especially Hinagi, who refused to do it in public. She held onto her jacket, bashfully telling Yukito that they should do the intimate act when they were all alone. Confused, Yukito asked her what she was yapping about, as he only wanted to see her injured feet. Hinagi quickly showed him her foot, and it was all swollen. Yukito apologized for their fast pacing, but Hinagi argued that it wasn't his fault. She then apologized for slowing them down, but Kamishiro reassured her not to worry about it. Suddenly, Hinagi flinched, obviously worried about something. Before Yukito could say anything, she defensively said that her feet didn't smell. Yukito said she would be offended if he told her that, which made Hinagi more paranoid. Trying to make her more comfortable, Yukito suggested pinching his nose so he didn't have to smell anything, but this only made the situation worse. Bro totally lacked social awareness. Yukito had had enough of Hinagi's drama, so he insisted on smelling her foot to prove that it didn't stink. Hinagi squirmed, but Yukito was a determined sniffer. Of course, they had to draw this panel. As Hinagi kept screaming, Yukito accepted his fate. Everyone will accuse him as the guy with a foot fetish, so he would just turn himself in. Shortly after, Yukito bandaged Hinagi's feet. She tried standing, while Yukito asked her if they were too tight. When she confirmed that it was just right, Yukito handed her a bottle of water, reassuring her that they would now go at a slower pace. However, before they could resume their hike, their teacher suddenly clutched onto Yukito's arm, asking him to bandage her feet too. Seeing the exhaustion on her face, Yukito could only say that she looked like a brain-dead zombie. Sensing that she got tired easily, Yukito told her that she will definitely get into trouble on one of her kids' sports festival. The teacher was offended as she wasn't even married yet. Just then, Yukito called Kamishiro, telling her to help the teacher while he instructed her. He reminded her about her plans to be the manager of the basketball team, so this would surely be a helpful skill. Kamishiro quickly jumped into action, following Yukito's instructions. Soon after, the task was done, and Kamishiro proudly asked Yukito for praise. However, Yukito was weirded out, as she looked like a dog begging for a stroll. Oddly enough, he tossed a piece of candy into the distance and Kamishiro immediately ran off to fetch it. Yukito didn't expect her to listen, but she came back with the candy in hand, asking for a little pat on the head. Riz so good he became Dr. Dolittle. Frustrated, Yukito reminded Kamishiro that she was not a dog, but a human. She furiously replied that he told her to follow his command, and she only complied. Having enough of this nonsense, Yukito exclaimed that if she were to act like a dog, then he would act like a breeder in response. A what now? Suddenly, Yukito patted Kamishiro much to her delight. However, he started rubbing her belly like an actual dog, making Kamishiro ticklish and uncomfortable. She tried to fight her way out of his clutches, bashfully telling Yukito, "Just the head." When he didn't listen, Kamishiro screamed that this wasn't what she expected, all while looking like she had just reached the pinnacle of pleasure. At this point, I'm out of commentaries. With Kamishiro lying motionless on the ground, Yukito asked her if she now remembered that she was human. Kamishiro slowly said she was, but then she rolled over to face him, reminding him not to do this to anyone else because he would get into trouble for forcing intimacy. Yukito was confused, as he had already committed a violation by doing it to her. He wondered if it was better to remain oblivious, but Kamishiro told him it was bad either way. Suddenly, Kamishiro realized how funny the situation was, and she burst into laughter. She noticed how it started to feel like last year when they were still close. Just then, she touched Yukito's arm, asking him if it felt okay now. He replied that it was, and that she didn't have to worry about it. However, Kamishiro never got over her guilt, and she worriedly admitted that she couldn't do what he asked. Upon seeing her face, Yukito felt guilty as well, realizing that Kamishiro would forgive him for anything he did to make up for her faults. Just then, Mihu called out to them, informing them that it was time to go. As Yukito walked away, he thought about the situation between him and Kamishiro. It seemed like they were frozen in time, unable to go forward. Later on, the group arrived at their final destination in the middle of the woods. The girls were amazed by the view, while Yukito contemplated if he truly was impressed. Mihu, on the other hand, only cared about eating. When it was finally time for lunch, Yukito grabbed his waterproof sheet and the group thanked him for being the resident Doraemon. After eating, Yukito asked Hinagi if her feet were okay, and she confirmed they were. She didn't expect to feel better right away, and she was just amazed by the bandage's effectiveness. Just then, Yukito offered her some candies and bandages, making Hinagi wonder why he was so prepared for injuries. She then remembered what had happened to him in middle school, and it all made sense. Yukito was shocked that she knew about this, so Hinagi revealed to him that she was always watching him. Okay, creep. While Yukito wondered why she did this, Hinagi asked why he helped her, to which he simply replied that they were classmates. Hinagi seemed disappointed with his response, but she tried keeping a calm exterior. Suddenly, Yukito noticed the bear keychain attached to her phone and he was surprised that she still had it. Dazed by what he just said, Hinagi's eyes sparkled as she realized Yukito still remembered. He replied that it was from the festival and Hinagi confirmed it. She then held the little bear close to her chest, saying that she had fun back then. Suddenly, Yukito started talking about Hinagi's relationship, asking if she had a fight with her boyfriend. She tried answering his question, but she couldn't continue. She then asked him what to do if he hurt someone else's feelings, and Yukito quickly replied that he would apologize. However, Hinagi shook her head, arguing that she would never be forgiven. Hearing this, Yukito suggested they could just start over, which confused Hinagi. Yukito elaborated, saying that if she could still fix it, she should try starting anew with her boyfriend. Hinagi had a moment of enlightenment and she thanked him as she stood up. Suddenly, she faced Yukito with her head bowed, asking him for forgiveness for all the mean things she had said to him. She bowed even more, admitting she was afraid that they wouldn't be able to go back to what they once were. She was beyond terrified that they wouldn't be together anymore. She also admitted that asking for forgiveness was easy, as she couldn't just tell Yukito to forget about everything. Yukito tried easing his way into the conversation, but Hinagi kept talking, admitting that she was unreasonable, arrogant, and selfish. However, it didn't change the fact that she was sorry. Her voice echoed throughout the crowd, making everyone gaze towards them. Just then, Yukito said that he didn't remember her saying anything mean, which shocked Hinagi. Sensing her confusion, Yukito explained that he should be sorry for exposing her boyfriend. He was more than thankful that she wanted to make amends. He then added that he only needed to get the pain out of his system, which explained his actions. Hinagi frantically asked why he was apologizing, as she was clearly in the wrong back then. Yet Yukito remained calm, his expression unreadable as he acknowledged that everything she had said back then was true, even if it had been harsh. He had come to understand his place in her life. With a gentle smile, he reassured her that the distance between them wasn't about his feelings being unreturned, but simply the result of choosing different paths. He knew Hinagi had a kind heart, which was why it pained him to see her crying before him. Since when did this dude become Gandhi? Hinagi was important to Yukito, and this was why he could only pray for her happiness from a distance. He knew he had lost his worth as a childhood friend, and they were nothing more than classmates. Later that day, the class boarded the school bus, ready to head home. Just as Hinagi was about to step on, she suddenly froze, rummaging frantically through her bag. Her expression grew tense as she realized something was missing. Kamishiro noticed and asked what was wrong, but Hinagi didn't respond. Instead, her eyes fixated on the string attached to her phone. The small bear keychain was gone. Before she could run off to find it, Yukito grabbed her wrist, reminding her that the bus was about to leave. She protested, insisting that the keychain was important because he had given it to her. But Yukito remained unmoved, telling her that her boyfriend could easily replace it with as many as she wanted. That was the last straw. Hinagi snapped, her frustration boiling over as she yelled that she had had enough of this. Yukito was taken aback, realizing just how much the keychain meant to her. Despite everything, he couldn't just leave her like this. Moments later, Hinagi sat on the bus, gripping the string that once held the bear. Her mind raced. Was this punishment for trying to mend things with Yukito? If so, it felt cruel. That little charm wasn't just an accessory. It was proof of all the time they had spent together, the last gift he had ever given her. She knew she could ask him for another one, but it wouldn't be the same. Staring out the window, she felt torn. Should she go back and search for it? The thought gnawed at her, but deep down she knew she couldn't, not with her injury holding her back. All she could do was sit there trembling as the bus pulled away. Later at school, the teacher asked some of the students where Yukito was. One of them replied that he felt unwell and went home, making the teacher skeptical because the young man didn't inform her beforehand. The teacher asked Mihu if this were true, but he merely said he didn't know. Hearing the whole class fuss about Yukito, Hinagi could only feel worried. Unbeknownst to everyone, Yukito went back to the forest, declaring that he was back. He sighed, knowing he couldn't ignore Hinagi's whiny face. As he started his search, he promised himself that he would only go on one round, and after that he'd give up. Hinagi laid on her bed, staring at her phone with a heavy heart, murmuring to herself that there was no way to restore what she had with Yukito. Their families used to attend festivals together, but over time it had just been the two of them. She remembered one particular night when Yukito had reached for her hand, but she had instinctively pulled away, embarrassed by how sweaty her palm was. She had tried to discreetly wipe it dry, hoping he wouldn't notice, but he never tried to hold her hand again. Welp, there goes her chances. Now she couldn't help but wonder, if she had just let him hold her hand that day, would things have turned out differently? Would they have continued spending time together, maybe even holding hands without hesitation? Would they have kissed, walked home together, and become something more? But now, all she could do was wonder. She couldn't really ask him why because she was to blame for everything. She destroyed their bond. Yukito finally tracked down the bear, though night had already fallen, and he had nearly given up hope of finding it. Sweaty and covered in dirt, he gave himself credit for the discovery, despite his doubts. Holding the bear in his hands, he wondered how long Hinagi would cherish it. He had already discarded everything she had ever given him, both objects and memories alike. Brushing the thought aside, he decided to head home. But before he could take a step, he suddenly lost his footing and tumbled down the hill. As he plummeted, he accepted that this was the end. In his mind, he silently bid farewell to his mother, his sister, Hinagi, Kamishiro, and even Mihu. What a drama queen. It dawned on him that he had only known a handful of people in his life, yet somehow that felt like enough. And so, embracing his fate, Yukito let out a scream as he fell. Back during the festival, Hinagi eagerly dragged Yukito along to get some plum candy with her. He knew that apple candy was her favorite, but she claimed she didn't want to open her mouth too much. So they settled for plum candy, enjoying the moment like carefree kids. After that, Hinagi insisted he play a shooting game to win her a bear keychain. To him, the bear looked ugly, but he tried to win it for her anyway, simply because she seemed happy. By middle school, Hinagi had become even more frustrating. Yet Yukito still held on to the hope that they would return to the festival together the following summer. Seeing her smile as she clutched the bear, he was convinced that their bond would only grow stronger. Just as Hinagi was about to tell Yukito something, a burst of fireworks lit up the sky, drowning out her words. She had just started talking about plans for the next year when a group of overly excited boys accidentally bumped into her mid-sentence. Reacting quickly, Yukito grabbed her hand to keep her from falling, but to his shock, she immediately swatted it away. She hastily wiped her sweaty palms, but the damage was done. Yukito was already fixated on the rejection, realizing at that moment that things between them would never be the same. That slap wasn't just a reflex, it was a rejection. The next morning, Yukito woke up in bed, his body aching from a cold. At some point he had managed to make it home, only to collapse in the rain. As he glanced at the clock, he realized he had been asleep for over half a day. He vaguely recalled having a nostalgic dream, though he couldn't tell if it had been happy or sad. All that was left was the unmistakable feeling of loss. His gaze then drifted to the bear sitting beside the clock, knowing he had to return it to Hinagi. At school, Yuri approached Mihu and asked to speak with him in private. Mihu was caught off guard but followed her out of the classroom without hesitation. Watching them leave, Hinagi couldn't help but wonder if Yuri was about to confess to Mihu. But knowing her, that seemed impossible. Everything Yuri did was always for Yukito's sake, which only confirmed Hinagi's suspicion. Yukito had really gone home early because he was sick. Still, curiosity got the better of her and she found herself eavesdropping on their conversation, a lingering worry for Yukito tugging at her. In the hallway, Mihu asked what was wrong and Yuri bluntly stated that she had a question about the previous day. Without warning, she lashed out, demanding to know why Yukito had come home soaked from the rain. Hearing this, Hinagi froze in confusion. He had gone home before everyone else, hadn't he? Did that mean he had gone back for the bear? Before she could piece it together, she instinctively ran after Yuri, calling out to ask if Yukito was okay. Without breaking her stride, Yuri responded flatly that it was just a mild cold, and that his fever had already gone down. Hinagi let out a sigh of relief, but before she could say anything else, Yuri abruptly cut her off, warning her not to test her patience. Turning to face Hinagi with a sharp glare, Yuri's tone turned cold and condescending as she demanded to know what really happened that day. Hinagi's body tensed, and in an instant all the guilt and emotions she had been holding back boiled over. Trembling, she finally broke down, confessing that everything was her fault. She had said something she never should have. Yuri smirked, asking her if she had tricked her brother again. With a threatening tone, she warned her not to do it again. Hinagi worried that Yuri was getting the wrong picture, but it didn't matter. She had to apologize first. However, before Hinagi could say anything, Yuri suddenly walked away, claiming that she didn't have time for her. Hinagi pleaded with her to listen, but Yuri flashed her a death glare, warning her not to follow. Left with no choice, Hinagi cried as Yuri faded into the distance. Meanwhile, Yukito was already starting to feel better. He flexed his body but then realized that he was bored and hungry. However, before he could get up to cook, he suddenly overheard people murmuring by the door. Just then, Yuri busted into the room, furiously looking at him. She asked if he felt better, and Yukito confirmed it. He then asked if someone was at the door and Yuri replied that it was the newspaper man. Yukito immediately caught on that his sister was lying and wasted no time calling her out on it. In response, Yuri challenged him to repeat what he had just said, forcing Yukito to backpedal and admit he had spoken out of turn. Raising an imaginary white flag in surrender, he conceded defeat, knowing full well that talking back to his sister was simply against the unspoken rules of their household. Without another word, Yuri handed him a plastic bag filled with supplies to help him feel better. To his surprise, everything inside was peach-flavored. She then asked if he needed anything else, noting that he already looked much better than he had that morning. Yukito declined, but Yuri insisted, offering to wipe him down and make him some porridge. Amused, Yukito let out a laugh, smugly questioning whether she even knew how to cook. That was a mistake. Offended, Yuri dared him to repeat himself, and Yukito immediately dropped to the floor in regret, knowing he had overstepped. Unwilling to risk his stomach on Yuri's cooking, Yukito decided he'd make the porridge himself. Ironically, despite being the one in perfect health, Yuri casually asked him to make a portion for her as well. Just then, his eyes landed on his phone. He hadn't checked it in a while. The moment he did, he was met with an overwhelming flood of messages from Hinagi, causing a wave of anxiety to wash over him. In that instant, he regretted checking his phone at all. A little while later, Yukito put on his jacket and excused himself to head to the convenience store. On the way, he unexpectedly ran into Hinagi, who wasted no time rushing toward him and pulling him into a tight embrace. Panicked, Yukito immediately tried to push her away, stammering that he smelled like sweat. However, Hinagi was stronger than he had anticipated. With tears welling in her eyes, she confessed how worried she had been, fearing something terrible had happened to him. Caught off guard, Yukito hesitated before asking if she had come to his house earlier. When she confirmed it, everything suddenly clicked. Yuri hadn't been arguing with the newspaper man, but with Hinagi. Realizing this, Yukito quickly apologized for his sister's behavior, but Hinagi simply laughed it off, saying that Yuri would be so mad if she heard that. Yukito was caught off guard by how unfazed Hinagi seemed about everything that had happened. He had expected her to be mad at Yuri, but she remained surprisingly calm. Without a word, Yukito handed her the ugly bear, and she accepted it without hesitation. She already knew he had gone back to find it, but Yukito, trying to play it cool, casually remarked that since he wasn't in any clubs, he had nothing better to do. Hinagi simply smiled, thanking him for retrieving the little symbol of their bond. As they continued walking, Hinagi apologized for all the trouble she had caused. Yukito, however, didn't acknowledge it and instead asked if her feet were okay. She reassured him they were fine, then reminisced about how nostalgic everything felt. They used to stay out late all the time, only to get scolded for it afterward. Out of nowhere, Hinagi suddenly declared that she didn't want to go home yet. Before she could process his response, Yukito randomly asked if she still had an issue with her smelly feet. Completely blindsided, Hinagi gawked at him, demanding to know how long he planned to believe that rumor. Yukito, genuinely confused, asked if she was worried about something other than the smell, and she immediately shot back, flustered that it wasn't like that. Seeing her over-the-top reaction, Yukito smirked, remarking that this was the Hinagi he knew. For a second, he had thought she had undergone a complete personality overhaul. At his words, Hinagi hesitated, softly asking if she had really changed. She instinctively wrapped her arms around herself, painfully aware that she had changed. On that day, he regretted the most. Wanting to shift the topic, she asked why he had gone back for the bear when he had been avoiding her all this time. Yukito simply smiled and said he was willing to help her when she was in trouble. Hinagi pressed further, asking if it was just because they were childhood friends, but he immediately shot that down. With a serious expression, Yukito told her that if she ever needed help, she should take the initiative to ask for it. He hesitated before reminding her, almost as if he needed to say it out loud for himself, that he could no longer be by her side. But before he could step away, Hinagi grabbed his arm, desperately pleading for him to stay by her side forever. "Girl, don't you have a man?" Yukito's face darkened. He turned away, telling her that wasn't his duty anymore. Then out of nowhere, Hinagi dropped a bombshell. She had broken up with her boyfriend, and the plot thickens. They had only lasted 2 weeks, and she apologized for not telling Yukito sooner. She wept before him, desperately asking if they couldn't go back to the old times as childhood friends. Yukito's response was immediate. He couldn't. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Hinagi, refusing to back down, asked if it was too late for them or if his heart belonged to Kamishiro. Yukito denied it outright, but his next words cut deeper than she expected. He didn't feel the same way about her anymore. Hinagi's breath hitched. She had prepared herself for a painful conversation, but hearing it out loud still stung. Still, she stood firm, her voice unwavering as she admitted that she had always liked him, even as kids. In fact, she had been overjoyed when he confessed to her. She had wanted to answer him right away, but she had her reasons. Before she could continue speaking, Yukito gently pushed her away from him, saying he didn't know she was such a liar. Ouch, right in the gut. Yukito wasn't buying a word of what she said. He asked if she truly hadn't dated her boyfriend simply because she liked him, or if, by her logic, she wouldn't mind dating someone she didn't like. Hinagi's fingers tightened around the bear, her voice trembling as she insisted that she was telling the truth. Back then, she had panicked. Yukito was popular, mature, and capable of achieving great things. On top of that, he was kind. Too kind. And when the rumors about him and Kamishiro started spreading, more and more girls started approaching him. Meanwhile, Hinagi felt shackled by her own life, unable to move forward until things spiraled beyond her control. She thought back to the childhood promise they once made, how she swore to always be by his side and how he vowed to help her whenever she needed him. She clung to that memory, wondering if Yukito had long since forgotten. But he hadn't. He went back for the bear, didn't he? Hinagi wanted to keep talking, to explain everything, but she couldn't stop Yukito from walking away. She stood there, frozen, unable to fix the mess she had created. Her vision blurred as tears welled up, guilt and regret gnawing at her. She had been too scared to lay her heart bare, fearing that if Yukito saw the ugliness inside her, he would hate her even more. She thought herself the worst person in the world, someone whose love had been tainted by jealousy and fear. But even so, she lifted her chin, determination flaring in her chest. If she wanted to move forward, she had to take the first step. First, she had to mend what was broken. She would make him stop hating her. Then, only then, would she finally apologize for everything. Even if it meant starting from a place where he resented her, she would prove to him the true love of Suzurikawa Hinagi. All right, pack it up, Sailor Moon. Yuri handed Yukito a 1,000 yen bill, and he immediately assumed it was meant to cover his medical expenses. Though she had already showered him with gifts the day before, he couldn't shake the feeling that it might not be enough. However, the moment he voiced his concern, Yuri's temper flared. She demanded to know if he was mocking her, leaving Yukito too horrified to argue. Silently, he accepted the money, deciding it was best not to push his luck. Just as he thought the ordeal was over, Yuri extended her hand, insisting they should walk hand in hand since he had just recovered. Yukito nearly short-circuited at the suggestion. Was his sister out of her mind? They were in high school now. Walking around holding hands was the ultimate form of social suicide. Worse, if he gave in once, it would only encourage her further. Without hesitation, he refused. At least, that's how things should have gone. Instead, by the time they reached school, Yuri was latched onto his arm like a bloodthirsty leech. Yukito could only sigh in defeat as they walked through the gates, fully aware of the eyes glued on them. Whispers erupted around them, and a few students even speculated if they were a couple. This woman has some undiagnosed problems. By the time he made it to class, Yukito wasted no time slumping into his seat, mentally cursing whatever cosmic force had doomed him to this fate. His misery was short-lived, however, as Mihu strolled over, grinning from ear to ear. With barely contained amusement, he teased Yukito about his dramatic entrance. That was the final straw. Yukito snapped, hastily clarifying that this entire situation was Yuri's doing. Thanks to his crazy sister, he was now the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. Overwhelmed, he abruptly stood up, declaring that he was heading to the canteen. Mihu pointed out that rumors would follow him there too, but Yukito dismissed the comment, insisting that he just wanted to buy something. Meanwhile, as Yuri was deep in thought, a sudden realization hit her, causing her friend to take notice and ask what was wrong. A wave of unease washed over Yuri as she questioned whether she had unknowingly become a sugar sister, financially supporting Yukito in the way a sugar daddy might be taken advantage of. The thought left her restless, wondering if her brother was subtly manipulating her generosity. Her friend, upon hearing this, could only sigh and express concern for Yuri's overactive imagination. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, a girl named Kyuka was informed that someone was looking for her. As she stood to meet this mysterious visitor, her classmates playfully teased her about her growing popularity. To her surprise, the boy waiting for her immediately asked her out. Though caught off guard, Kyuka swiftly turned him down. The boy, unfazed, pressed her for a reason, but she could only stammer, unsure of what to say. Seizing the moment, he proposed an alternative. They could start dating and get to know each other along the way. He then inquired if she had feelings for someone else, but she bashfully denied it. Her gaze drifted toward the stairs where Yukito sat, contently munching on sweet buns and muttering to himself. The boy, noticing Yukito's presence, asked if he needed anything, but Yukito simply responded that he was only there to enjoy his food. In his usual dramatic fashion, he declared himself a gloomy loner and assured them they could continue their conversation without minding him. However, the boy wasn't convinced, finding it difficult to ignore his presence. Eventually, the boy gave up and walked away, leaving Kyuka standing alone. Yukito exhaled in relief, satisfied that the trash had taken itself out. But before he could fully savor his victory, Kyuka suddenly sat beside him, expressing her relief that the awkward situation was finally over. Panic crept into Yukito's expression. He had just dodged one disturbance only to be roped into another. Without hesitation, Kyuka struck up a conversation, questioning why he was there and even jokingly asking if he had come to confess to her as well. Unbothered, Yukito shot back, telling his senpai that she was a bit too delusional. Unfazed by his bluntness, Kyuka revealed that she hadn't even known the boy who had confessed to her earlier, which was why she hadn't given him a proper response. Yukito, caught off guard by the admission, made it clear that he didn't ask. Wow, thanks for the emotional support. Kyuka, amused by his attitude, wondered if he was truly her junior given how rude he was being. Yukito, however, remained composed, stating that his two sweet buns were far more interesting than anything she had to say. Stunned, Kyuka's eyes welled up as she dramatically questioned whether she had actually lost to a couple of pastries. Yukito, on the other hand, was bewildered. Why was this girl sharing such things with someone she had only just met? Undeterred, Kyuka pressed on, urging him to at least listen to her, pointing out that he was just a gloomy loner with no friends. Without hesitation, Yukito loudly accused her of being an attention seeker, catching Kyuka off guard. Flustered, she panicked and immediately asked if he was angry. Out of nowhere, tears welled up in Yukito's eyes as he unexpectedly grew emotional. He admitted that, for an attention grabber, Kyuka was actually a kind person. Despite always seeing himself as a gloomy loner, no one had ever acknowledged it the way she did. And for some strange reason, that made him incredibly happy. Kyuka, baffled by the sudden praise, questioned why he was flattering her now. But any hope of a genuine moment was immediately shattered when Yukito casually reminded her that she was still an attention grabber. Annoyed by the constant name-calling, Kyuka finally snapped, demanding that he stop referring to her that way, especially when she was already experiencing one of the most embarrassing moments of her life. Completely unfazed, Yukito asked what she preferred to be called instead, only to quickly realize that he didn't actually care. This revelation sent Kyuka into a fit of fury. Just as the tension built, Kyuka's mood abruptly shifted, and she formally introduced herself as Suma Kyuka, a second-year student. Meanwhile, Yukito remained completely uninterested, his full attention still fixated on his sweet buns, completely ignoring her introduction. Frustrated, Kyuka practically begged him to show interest in something, anything other than food. She insisted that he introduce himself as well, prompting Yukito to finally mutter his name. She then curiously asked if he would continue coming to that spot, to which he nonchalantly replied that he did so once or twice a week, though he also ate in his classroom. Upon hearing this, Kyuka's lips curled into a small smile. If that was the case, she might start visiting the spot more often too. Cringe. Yukito let out a small sigh, commenting that it would be troublesome. However, he quickly took it back, but it was too late. Kyuko was keeping tabs on the things he said. Standing up, she stretched and remarked that she felt better after talking to him. Just as she was about to leave, Yukito, ever the opportunist, casually asked for a consultation fee. Without missing a beat, Kyuko promised to bring him some cream buns next time. At this, Yukito's eyes practically sparkled. He dramatically called her a goddess and insisted on addressing her as such from now on. Kyuko, now officially done with him, screamed at him to knock it off before stomping away. As silence returned, Yukito mourned the loss of his peaceful hideout. With a deep sigh, he wondered when his quiet school life would actually come true. That afternoon, the sky betrayed him. The rain came down in thick sheets, leaving Yukito stranded in some random alley. The weather report had failed him, and of course, he hadn't thought to bring an umbrella. He glanced at the sky, judging if it would let up anytime soon, but seeing no sign of mercy, he mustered the courage to make a break for it. With his school bag held over his head, he sprinted through the rain. That was when he noticed a woman stepping out of a cab. She carried multiple boxes, visibly struggling as the rain drenched her. Without thinking, Yukito rushed over to help. The woman tried to refuse at first, but he reassured her that he lived nearby. Finally, with a small, grateful smile, she formally asked for his assistance. Yukito agreed, leading to his next questionable life decision. Soon, Yukito found himself inside the woman's apartment. The place was sparsely furnished, which she explained was because she had just moved in. He then sat on her sofa, still slightly damp from the rain, and suddenly became painfully aware of his situation. A woman had just invited him into her home. Before his brain could spiral into anything inappropriate, the woman returned with tea, formally introducing herself as Himiyama Hisaki. Yukito responded in kind, but the moment his name left his lips, something changed. Hisaki's eyes widened in shock. Then, without warning, she sat down way too close to him. "Welcome to Pound Town, Junior." Trying to break the awkward silence, Yukito asked if she lived alone. Himiyama then opened up about her past. She once had a fiancé, but after her infertility treatments failed, his family rejected her because they wanted an heir to inherit their inn. Yukito was stunned. Does he have free therapy plastered on his forehead? First Kyuka, now this? He started wondering if he had some weird energy that attracted emotionally distressed people. Meanwhile, Himiyama kept venting about her failed relationship, lamenting that she wouldn't be alone if only she could have a child. As if that wasn't enough oversharing, she suddenly mentioned that she also once dreamed of becoming a teacher but failed at that too. Trying to keep the conversation from spiraling further into existential despair, Yukito chimed in that she would make a great homeroom teacher. That was all it took. Himiyama, visibly moved, grabbed his hand and stared at him with teary eyes, practically begging for validation. With tears welling up in her eyes, she asked if he would truly be happy if she were his teacher. She seemed very desperate for a positive comment, so Yukito gave her the answer she needed. Hearing this, Himiyama thanked him and asked if he wanted to be friends. Yukito didn't really have a choice, so he said yes. Himiyama suddenly sprang from her seat, deciding that she should introduce herself to Yukito's parents as a newcomer to the neighborhood. She also declared that she would bring soba for the occasion. Wasting no time, she grabbed Yukito and dragged him to his house, leaving him with little say in the matter. At the door, Yukito's mother hesitated upon hearing someone outside. When she opened it and saw Himiyama, concern immediately crossed her face as she wondered what kind of trouble her son had gotten into this time. Before she could say anything, Yukito quickly introduced Himiyama, explaining that she had just moved nearby. Relieved by the harmless explanation, his mother welcomed her, and Himiyama politely handed over the soba she had brought. As they stood in the doorway, Himiyama shared that Yukito had helped her move her things. However, throughout the conversation, Yukito remained stiff, in more places than one, distracted by something strange. She still hadn't let go of his hand. The lingering contact made him question how they had ended up holding hands in the first place. Himiyama, completely unbothered, then turned to Yukito with a warm smile, announcing that she would do anything he wanted as a token of gratitude. His mind instantly raced, seizing the opportunity without hesitation. He was, after all, a man who knew exactly what he wanted. With a teasing expression, Himiyama leaned in, encouraging him to simply say the word. Yukito was left speechless, wondering if this was too extravagant a reward for merely helping someone move stuff. However, before she could push things further, he quickly warned her not to spoil him too much, or he might just take her up on the offer and request an embrace. Without any warning, Himiyama suddenly pulled Yukito into a tight embrace, pressing his face directly into her giant melons. Yukito tried to escape her clutches, insisting it was all just a joke, though he couldn't deny his surprise at how soft it felt. Meanwhile, his mother stood frozen in complete disbelief, struggling to process what she was witnessing. Lost in the moment, Yukito found himself oddly at peace, as if all his worries had vanished right then and there. However, his bliss was short-lived as his mother snapped him back to reality, shouting at him to get a grip. After the whole ordeal, Himiyama gently patted Yukito on the head, offering an apology for treating him like a child. The situation was already ridiculous enough, but Yukito casually admitted that it was actually a first for him. He had never experienced something like that before. In the middle of this bizarre moment, Yukito commented that Himiyama gave off the feeling of a mother figure, leaving his actual mother completely stunned at what she was hearing. Later on, Yukito apologized for his earlier inappropriate request, but Himiyama brushed it off, assuring him that he could always ask if he ever wanted to be pampered. However, a hint of sadness crept onto her face as she seemed to realize that this small gesture was all she could really give. Holding back tears, she excused herself and quietly left for home. Afterward, Yukito's mother found herself lost in thought, replaying the moment when Yukito said Himiyama felt more like a mother than she did. Searching her memory, she struggled to recall the last time she had ever spoiled her son, only to realize she never really had. Looking into Yukito's eyes, she sensed that he was someone who had grown used to expecting nothing from anyone. Guilt hit her hard as she came to terms with her own neglect. Realizing the damage had been done long ago, she knew she had no one to blame but herself. The thought of Yukito feeling unloved weighed heavily on her. Her spiral of regret was interrupted when Yukito mentioned her early arrival home. Snapping back to reality, she explained that she'd be working remotely for a while, only needing to go into the office once a week. With this new arrangement, she silently vowed to make amends and repair their relationship. Determined, she wasted no time putting on an apron and heading to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Soon after, Yuri entered the room, greeting everyone as she walked in. Without missing a beat, she turned to her brother, reminding him to speak up if he ever needed anything, stressing that she didn't require any kind of payment in return. Yukito nodded, though he found himself wondering what exactly she meant by anything. His mind drifted back to that morning when Yuri handed him some money, and he couldn't help but suspect that she might have been the one in need of help. Trying to be proactive, Yukito offered to dip into his savings, which immediately caught Yuri off guard. She questioned whether he was really that eager to get her involved in something. Yukito simply explained that he didn't have much use for the money anyway, but Yuri argued that relying on it like that wouldn't be healthy. Building up her confidence, Yuri declared she was ready to step up and help him, no payment required. Yukito, unsure where this was even going, agreed without much thought. Before she left the room, Yuri shot him an unsettling, oddly suggestive glance, reinforcing that she'd do whatever it took, leaving Yukito completely bewildered. What in the sweet home Alabama is this? Not long after, their mother called Yuri over to help wash the vegetables. Without hesitation, Yuri agreed, but then casually asked which detergent she should use, leaving both Yukito and their mother visibly stunned. The rest of the evening carried on quietly, but Yukito couldn't shake one lingering thought. What exactly did Yuri mean when she said it would be unhealthy? While the principal relaxed in his office, his attention shifted to the noise coming from below. Looking out the window, he spotted the first-year students undergoing their physical examination. Among them, several stood out with impressive speed, catching his eye as they raced across the field. Meanwhile, Yukito struggled to keep pace, falling behind Mihu, who wasted no time flaunting his victory. Frustrated and clinging to what pride he had left, Yukito regretted ever challenging the school's athletic ace. Desperate to salvage the situation, he threw down a new challenge, this time testing their flexibility. Elsewhere on the field, the girls gathered to cheer on Kamishiro, who had just set a new record. Watching from a distance, Yukito couldn't help but acknowledge her natural talent and remarkable athletic build. Still, something seemed off. Approaching her, he asked if she was feeling well, noting the subtle signs of fatigue. Kamishiro brushed it off with a forced smile, insisting that she was perfectly fine. Yukito, however, wasn't convinced. He'd only asked out of concern, but her dismissive response made the moment awkward, and he quietly excused himself, apologizing for bothering her. Before he could walk away, Kamishiro grabbed onto his jacket, stopping him. In a rare moment of honesty, she admitted she wasn't okay because she had skipped breakfast and hadn't eaten properly since the night before. Not wanting to seem weak, she had kept it to herself. Around them, the other girls watched the scene unfold, surprised by the unexpected confession. Yukito gently asked if her empty stomach was due to oversleeping, but Kamishiro explained she'd been busy and hadn't found time to eat anything beyond some instant noodles. Yukito sighed, unimpressed with her idea of a meal, pointing out that ramen alone hardly counted as proper nourishment. Despite the scolding, Kamishiro felt oddly comforted by his concern, though she reminded him that this wasn't exactly the best place to have such a personal conversation. Word of Kamishiro's condition quickly spread. One of the nearby girls asked if it was really true that she wasn't feeling well. Kamishiro downplayed it, assuring everyone that she wasn't so unwell that she couldn't keep going. Still curious, one of the girls asked Yukito how he even noticed something was wrong when no one else did. Yukito explained that Kamishiro's ponytail was usually lively and bounced around when she was in high spirits, but today it barely moved at all. His observation left the girls speechless, while Kamishiro argued back, pointing out that her ponytail wasn't some kind of mood indicator like a dog's tail. As whispers and gossip began swirling around them, Yukito remained unfazed, standing confidently by his theory without a second thought. Yukito gently reminded Kamishiro not to push herself too hard. With a soft smile, she nodded and apologized for making him worry. As he walked away, Yukito felt somewhat reassured that Kamishiro would be all right. But deep down there was still this lingering sense of unease he couldn't shake. Later that day, Yukito suddenly found himself cornered by a group of girls, all demanding to know if he was the Yukito Kokonoe everyone was talking about. Just like that, Bro had entered the harem multiverse. As the girls closed in around him, Yukito's brain spiraled. Was this one of those moments where he'd been reincarnated into a dating sim? Before he could get too lost in that thought, one of the girls snapped him back to reality, leaving him low-key shook that they weren't mind readers after all. While Yukito was still trying to process his accidental dating sim daydream, one of the girls asked if a certain girl would finally join the basketball team if he gave his approval. Totally confused, Yukito asked if they were talking about Kamishiro. Turns out Kamishiro had announced that she was willing to become the manager of the basketball club, the same one Yukito had been planning to join. She even told the others that if Yukito decided to join, she'd gladly sign up too. Yukito was stunned, realizing Kamishiro was basically acting like his personal manager now. Plus, it's not like he could even join the girls' basketball team anyway. Before he could respond, a random guy appeared out of nowhere, grabbed Yukito by the collar and demanded the girls hand him over. Yukito, honestly grateful for the rescue, thanked him, but the guy brushed it off like it was nothing. He explained that Mihu would agree to join the track and field club if Yukito joined too, so he was there to convince him. Hearing Mihu's name, Yukito was instantly annoyed. Picturing that smug, solar-powered face of his, the girl from the basketball team was absolutely livid, snapping at the guy from the track and field team, reminding him that she was the first to invite Yukito. But the track and field guy shot back, saying she didn't exactly have exclusive rights to recruit new talent. And if that was the case, he and his squad weren't about to hold back. Before Yukito could even process the chaos, more club leaders popped up out of nowhere like it was some sort of ambush. The soccer club leader stormed in, furious that they had already claimed Yukito first. Meanwhile, the leaders from the doubles tennis club and the baseball club both jumped in too, each trying to convince Yukito to pick their team instead. Meanwhile, Yukito stood there completely dumbfounded, wondering how all these people had just magically spawned around him. Instead of giving anyone an answer, Yukito dramatically placed his hand on his chin and concluded that this whole mess was probably because of the declining birth rate of the country. And with that very intellectual observation, Yukito decided the only logical move was to just run away from everyone. Later on, Yukito vented to Mihu about the absolute disaster he got himself tangled in. But instead of offering any sympathy, Mihu just laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. Meanwhile, Kamishiro rushed over to apologize, frantically explaining that she never expected the club members to go that overboard. Trying to calm him down, she reassured Yukito that the madness couldn't possibly last forever. Before the drama could continue, the teacher strolled into the room and announced that she'd drawn lots to decide everyone's new seating arrangements. As things settled, a girl named Mineta greeted Yukito. Trying to fit in, Yukito awkwardly attempted to sprinkle some girly lingo into the convo like he was trying to prove he was in the know. But Mineta just shut that down real quick, telling him there was absolutely no need for that. That moment made Yukito realize that talking like a girl wasn't exactly the secret weapon he thought it was. To make things worse, Mineta was visibly weirded out by how Yukito acted like girls were some kind of rare exotic creatures. Trying to play it off, Yukito claimed he was actually the rare animal here. Mineta laughed, but Yukito felt slightly betrayed by her reaction. Seeing his face, she quickly reassured him she didn't mean it like that. Then, out of nowhere, one of the other girls chimed in, telling Yukito that his dark jokes weren't exactly landing. That made him pause, questioning if they were really that bad that someone had to call him out publicly. Mihu, listening from the sidelines, was absolutely floored that Yukito was just now realizing this. A boy named Takashi suddenly invited himself into the conversation, but Yukito immediately shut him down with a glare, telling him that only gloomy people were allowed in this group. And just as everyone started getting a bit too comfortable, the teacher snapped at the class, reminding them that exams were right around the corner, and they better start prioritizing their studies. Then her mood took a sharp turn, as she revealed that 3 idiots from the Go Home Club had stirred up trouble, which then spiraled into chaos in the staff room. Yukito, absolutely oblivious to his involvement, leaned over to Kamishiro and casually warned her not to cause any trouble. But the teacher shut that down immediately, flat out telling Yukito he was one of the troublemakers. Sensei really hit him with the newsflash. Before leaving, the teacher gave everyone one last reminder to do their best on the exams. As she stepped out, she threw a sarcastic question at Mihu, aka Idiot Number 2, asking how he was holding up. Mihu, a bit embarrassed, mumbled that he was doing fine. After she left, Mihu turned to Yukito with a deadpan stare and officially labeled him Idiot Number 1, which naturally left Yukito fuming. Just then, Idiot Number 3, Kamishiro, turned to Yukito with a hopeful look, asking him to help her with her studies. That was all the motivation he needed. From that moment on, Yukito decided it was his life's mission to establish the ultimate study group. Mihu was absolutely on board with this ridiculous plan, proudly declaring himself Idiot Number 2, Yukito's right-hand man. However, things quickly spiraled out of control when their little study session suddenly became a full-blown movement. Yukito narrowed his eyes at Kamishiro, demanding an explanation. She sheepishly admitted that when she casually mentioned the study group, the news spread like wildfire and everyone wanted in. At that moment, the classroom erupted in cheers as students began assigning numbers to themselves. Fantastic! Now Yukito was leading an entire squad of self-proclaimed idiots. In the midst of the chaos, a girl named Hinagi timidly introduced herself as Idiot Number 8. Yukito blinked at her, confused. Why the hell was she here? She was smarter than everyone in the room combined. Clearly irritated, Hinagi shot back that there were some things she wasn't confident in. And so the legendary study group began. Yukito strutted up to the board, writing like he actually knew what he was talking about. With a dramatic flourish, he scrawled an equation onto the board, declaring that this exact question was bound to show up on the test. Mineta raised an eyebrow, questioning how he could possibly know that. Smirking, Yukito explained that the question had appeared on the exam 4 years in a row, so the odds were practically guaranteed. Then, with all the confidence of a prophet, he revealed his secret weapon. His saintly sister had blessed him with last year's test papers. The room erupted in cheers. The group was fired up, practically worshipping him as their new academic god. How gloomy of you, Yukito. As Yukito continued scribbling on the board, Kamishiro suddenly raised her hand to make an announcement, declaring that this was no longer a study group. Confused, Yukito wondered why, prompting Kamishiro to explain that a proper study group should involve learning how to actually solve problems, not just memorizing answers. After thinking it over, Yukito casually admitted that he personally wasn't struggling with any of the questions. This blunt and tone-deaf response immediately set off the group. Mineta, feeling completely over it, dramatically complained to Sakurai about how much she despised Yukito. Mihu, as usual, agreed without fully understanding what he was agreeing to. This only made Mineta even more emotional, declaring that she hated Mihu too. Meanwhile, Kamishiro warned Mihu not to let Yukito manipulate him, leaving him genuinely baffled as to when any so-called brainwashing had even taken place. Yukito, on the other hand, was stunned at how quickly Mihu changed sides. Feeling cornered, Yukito made a desperate attempt to win over Sakurai, seeking any form of backup. But Sakurai saw right through him, coldly brushing off the attempt and making it clear that no amount of pleading looks would change the situation. With everyone turning on him, Yukito could only lament the unfortunate reality that they had become rivals in the end. What a bunch of traitors. Amid the chaos, Hinagi, unaware of the drama, calmly asked what everyone was even doing and urged them to focus and prepare properly. Eventually, the group shifted gears and started solving actual problems instead of relying on recycled test questions. During the session, Sakurai couldn't help but notice how skilled Hinagi was at teaching. Her methods were clear, her tone was gentle, and her explanations were on point. The closet it made of glass. Sakurai. While the others were hard at work, Kamishiro approached Yukito for help on a particular question. After helping her out and making sure she understood, Yukito quietly distanced himself from the group to observe from afar. As the study session carried on, Yukito noticed a strange dynamic. Kamishiro and Hinagi weren't interacting at all. Curious, he asked Sakurai if there was some history between them. Without hesitation, Sakurai and Mineta confirmed it. The two were indeed rivals. Eventually, the study session came to an end, leaving everyone completely drained. Yukito, trying to lift the mood, reassured the group that they had covered pretty much everything, even if it was all a bit rushed. With a confident voice, he told everyone that they should be able to avoid failing grades now. Meanwhile, Kamishiro looked like she was on the verge of a full system shutdown, complaining that her brain felt like it was about to short-circuit. Yukito couldn't help but laugh, casually suggesting that she find a way to unwind. He shared that whenever he felt fried like that, he'd head over to the park and shoot some hoops. Kamishiro was shocked to hear that he still played basketball, but he explained that it was just a way to refresh his mind. Then, without missing a beat, Kamishiro asked if she could come with him. Yukito smiled and told her she could do whatever she wanted. And just like that, Kamishiro looked a little less stressed. Later that day, Yukito found himself at the park shooting hoops to shake off the stress from studying. After landing a clean shot, he held his arm up, still feeling a bit off about playing basketball again. But he brushed the thought away. No big deal. Meanwhile, Kamishiro, full of energy, announced that her warm-up was over and she was ready to jump in. Yukito couldn't believe she actually tagged along and started to wonder if inviting her was even a smart move. Before long, a group of older guys rolled onto the court calling out to Yukito. Their leader, Hayakuma, greeted him saying it had been a while. Yukito introduced Kamishiro, explaining these were some university players he'd known since middle school, and they'd been playing together ever since. Kamishiro was polite and friendly, but things took a weird turn when one of the guys asked if she was Yukito's girlfriend. Flustered, she quickly denied it, which only made them tease that they must still be figuring things out. Out of nowhere, Yukito tossed out the wild claim that Kamishiro was a dog, leaving her completely stunned. The guys immediately ran with it, joking about how far along their relationship must be if they were already pulling off such extreme positions. Kamishiro panicked, scrambling to clear up the misunderstanding, but Yukito just kept adding fuel to the fire by calling himself a stray dog who didn't even have a collar. Desperate, Kamishiro blurted out that her name was officially listed on the Kamishiro family pedigree, which left everyone speechless, now genuinely questioning if she was actually, somehow, a dog. At that moment, Yukito clarified that he and Kamishiro were just classmates. Kamishiro quickly introduced herself, mentioning that she knew how to play basketball and had come out to exercise with him. Hayakuma smirked, realizing Yukito hadn't changed at all. Soon after, Hayakuma invited both of them to join their game since they were already there. Yukito and Kamishiro happily agreed, and the match began. As the game went on, everyone was impressed by Yukito's skills. He found himself fully immersed, realizing he felt more excited than usual. This was different from the usual club games. It was purely for fun. With each shot, he realized how good it felt to simply enjoy the game again, and he was glad he could still feel that way. Later on, Hayakuma and the others said their goodbyes, mentioning how much fun they had and suggesting they play again sometime. Once Yukito and Kamishiro were alone, Kamishiro asked if he planned on heading home, but he casually replied that he wanted something sweet. With a determined look, he announced that he wanted a crepe, so the two of them went to satisfy his craving. While they ate, Kamishiro couldn't help but think how much it felt like a casual date. Almost as if he had read her mind, Yukito suddenly commented that he would hate having a smelly date, leaving her caught off guard. On their way home, Kamishiro mentioned she didn't know Yukito had friends like the ones they just played with. Yukito replied that she didn't know everything about him, prompting Kamishiro to say that she wanted to learn more. She added that the day felt nostalgic, like being back in middle school, and spending time with him made her happy. Yukito admitted that he had fun too. It had been a while since he felt that way. Hearing this, Kamishiro excitedly suggested they play again sometime and even offered to be his manager. But Yukito's mood shifted, and he seriously reminded her to stop trying to make up for her mistakes, just like he'd told her before. Kamishiro clarified that wasn't what she meant. She only wanted to see him play again, though she admitted it might be selfish of her. Yukito replied that he didn't really have the motivation or a goal to push himself like that anymore. When Kamishiro asked if he'd consider playing again if he found a reason, he said it would depend. For now, he explained, being part of the Go Home Club felt right. He was getting used to a more laid-back lifestyle, and honestly, he didn't mind it. But even as he said all this, he couldn't shake the feeling that Kamishiro was different. People depended on her. Someone like her shouldn't be wasting her talents doing nothing in the Go Home Club. More than that, her bright personality had probably saved countless people, just like it had saved him once. And yet, lately she didn't smile as much. Out of nowhere, Kamishiro hugged him from behind and confessed that she wanted to stay with him because she liked him. She begged him not to leave. Back then, she didn't even understand why she'd said those hurtful things. Yukito, completely confused, admitted he didn't know what she was trying to say. Kamishiro stayed quiet, realizing how complicated love could be. When Yukito pressed her for answers, she simply held his hand, explaining that despite everything, he still protected her even after all the cruel things she'd said. That was why she was standing there now. Most importantly, she confessed she still had feelings for him. It wasn't about repaying him or fixing the past. This was just her honest wish. She placed his hand over her heart and asked if she was finally reaching him. Yukito brushed it off, saying her heartbeat was probably from all the exercise. But Kamishiro argued they had already cooled down and he should at least acknowledge her feelings. Suddenly, Yukito pulled his hand away, saying he didn't understand. Internally, he struggled, unsure how to handle her getting so close. Then, in an unexpected move, he wiped a bit of cream off her cheek. Kamishiro laughed, admitting she'd been waiting for him to notice and clean it off. Yukito felt a bit awkward. Then Kamishiro continued, reminding him of how he once shared his reasons for playing basketball. She asked if maybe she could become his new reason to play again. Just then, Kamishiro placed the back of his hand on her chest again, gently saying that she wanted to become his motivation. Kamishiro admitted she didn't want this moment to end, not when they were finally getting somewhere. Yukito, still unsure, asked if this so-called motivation included getting physically close to her. It was a bold and inappropriate question, but Kamishiro, without hesitation, said she didn't mind if that's what it took to inspire him. Gently placing his palm on her cheek, she reminded him once more that she truly liked him. She wasn't lying, and it wasn't about making up for her mistakes, it was just her sincere wish. Sis got balls for days. Yukito had always found the concept of liking someone to be ambiguous. He assumed any feelings he had would eventually fade into mere fantasies. Even his past affection for Hinagi had completely vanished. Adding to his cynicism, his mother had gone through a divorce. As he gazed out of Himiyama's window, he pondered Japan's 35% divorce rate, realizing that promises of eternal love were ultimately meaningless. This was simply the harsh reality of life. At that moment, Himiyama entered the room, announcing that she had finally finished moving her things, which was why she had invited him over again. She brought him cakes and coffee, asking him to choose his favorite. Then out of nowhere, she cheerfully expressed how happy she was to have run into him. Yukito, however, vividly remembered how Himiyama had randomly grabbed him on his way home, and just like before, she was sitting far too close. There was no doubt about it. This woman was trying to seduce him. Feeling uncomfortable, Yukito shifted away slightly, explaining that he was worried about smelling like sweat. But instead of backing off, Himiyama simply replied that she didn't mind. "Seriously, read the room, woman." He told himself he needed to leave immediately, otherwise he'd sink even deeper into this quicksand. But his body wouldn't budge. The soothing aroma in the air was chipping away at his resistance, and soon he didn't want to move at all. After all, he was just a guy. Ignoring a beautiful woman wasn't exactly in his nature. His thoughts drifted to a memory of his mother attending Parents' Day. Her beauty had been so striking that he forced himself to keep his eyes on the blackboard, unable to look at her directly. Among the many guardians present, she stood out the most. Dude has a thing for his mom. Classic. The conversation then shifted as Yukito questioned Himiyama about her fiancé. She grew defensive, assuring him that her loyalty belonged to him instead. However, he brushed aside her response and pressed further, wanting to know her true thoughts about her ex-fiancé. The question lingered in his mind, tied to his own memories of his mother's divorce. After a pause, Himiyama admitted that she had once liked him, but some circumstances couldn't be overcome by love alone. In the end, they had no choice but to part ways. Curious, Yukito asked if she had managed to erase her feelings entirely. Himiyama explained that she hadn't. She had simply given up on them. With all emotions set aside, the most she could say was that she had loved her ex-fiancé in the past, but not anymore. A sense of unease settled over Yukito as he sulked, lamenting that he could never imagine himself feeling that way for anyone. Himiyama, noticing his frustration, gently patted his head, advising him not to dwell on such thoughts. As a student, his focus should be on himself. However, she reminded him that some priorities never truly disappear, just like the wounds people leave on others. Her words struck him deeply, leaving him so stunned that he had to step away and clear his thoughts. Later, as he sat down for dinner at Himi's place, his mind continued to wander. He questioned whether he was even capable of developing emotions in the way others did. Just as he pondered this, Himiyama appeared in a revealing new outfit, one that barely concealed anything. A shiver ran through him as he tensed up, feeling as if she were actively trying to end him then and there. The situation escalated further when Himiyama moved closer. She playfully hinted at a secret, challenging him with her presence. His composure cracked as she asked if she looked good, forcing him to admit that she did. Despite his desperate attempts to maintain control, Himiyama continued to push, questioning whether something had already been broken. That was the final straw. Overwhelmed, Yukito bolted from the room, unwilling to deal with Himiyama any longer. Yukito returned home in a daze, his behavior immediately causing concern for his mother. He muttered under his breath about how clothing would be the death of him before heading straight to the bathroom for a shower. Observing his strange state, his mother began to suspect that Himiyama might not be just an ordinary neighbor after all. Her thoughts then drifted to her son and the kind of relationship they shared. If Yukito had any luck with women, it likely stemmed from her influence. She considered how childhood experiences shape a person, and in his case, she had only given him a small portion of the love he deserved. Her demanding schedule meant she was often absent, leaving early for work and barely spending time with him. Before she knew it, he had stopped confiding in her altogether. Even though Yuri, his older sister, had doted on him, she was still just a child herself. Then came the incident with Yuri, an event that changed everything. From that moment on, Yukito became a different person. His emotions and words seemed locked away, unreachable. His dark, distant gaze reflected nothing but rejection. A memory resurfaced from a time she visited his class. Other children eagerly waved at their mothers, but Yukito never even turned his head. The realization stung, though she knew she had no one to blame but herself. Even so, she was still his mother. No matter how much he distanced himself, she refused to stop showing him her love. That was the one thing she would never give up on. At that moment, Yukito's mother entered the shower, insisting that it wasn't unusual for them to bathe together at times. However, the situation left him utterly stunned. Despite his shock, his mother remained unfazed, genuinely believing that washing the back of his head was a perfectly normal way to show her affection. Completely overwhelmed, Yukito panicked, exclaiming in frustration that he couldn't even have peace in his own home. "Can my boy please catch a break?" A short-haired girl stood by the train station gazing at her phone as she read a text message. Her friend Yumi was asking for help, and the short-haired girl couldn't wait to jump into action. Elsewhere, Yukito sat in a crowded train, realizing that it seemed like a baptism for corporate slaves. The day before, Yukito paid a visit to his aunt, Yukika, his mother's younger sister. Years ago, due to certain circumstances, he actually lived at Yukika's place for a while. Ever since then, overnight stays there had become a regular thing, but whenever he stayed over, it meant commuting to school by train. Fortunately, that morning, Yukito managed to snag a seat, winning the daily game of musical chairs. He felt pretty good about himself, especially with all the jealous eyes on him. But that moment didn't last long. In the crowd, Yukito noticed a man with black hair being a perv. Disgusted and shocked, he watched the scene unfold. The train was already a chaotic mess, and this just made the morning even worse. Somehow, as always, Yukito's streak of bad luck with women continued, and once again he found himself in trouble. Jumping to the present, Yukito was now pinned to the ground by a short-haired girl. She was fuming, calling him out for daring to show his face at school after allegedly being a molester. Without holding back, she grilled Yukito, demanding to know if he felt no shame. Yukito insisted it wasn't him, but the girl refused to believe a word. He quickly realized that arguing back would only make things worse. She wasn't going to listen. The girl accused Yukito of being a perv to her friend Hiromi Yumi, claiming she had seen it happen with her own eyes. But all Yukito could do was sarcastically suggest she should probably get her vision checked. Bars? The girl went on to say that if Yukito had just admitted to what happened and apologized, maybe there would have been some room for forgiveness. But Yukito refused to admit to something he didn't do. Frustrated, the girl asked if he thought being a student made him immune to punishment. To her, talking to him felt like a waste of time. People like him, she said, didn't belong at their school. Just then, a police officer arrived, concerned about what was happening. But before things escalated, a woman stepped forward and defended Yukito, saying he wasn't the culprit. When Yukito looked up, he recognized her. She was the woman from the train, the one he had given his seat to earlier. She backed him up, thanking him for his kindness and asking Yumi to rethink what had actually happened. The woman pointed out that Yukito only came close to Yumi when they arrived at the station, and she gently encouraged her to recall who else had been nearby when the assault took place. Eventually, Yumi realized her mistake and bowed in apology to Yukito. Realizing he had only tried to help her, Yukito told her it was fine, saying they both shared some blame in how things turned out. The short-haired girl supported Yumi, helping her through the situation, but as Yukito turned to leave, his expression hardened. With a bitter edge, he muttered that maybe helping out had been a mistake after all. The short-haired girl was caught off guard by Yukito's words. Feeling guilty, she quickly apologized, promising she'd never make the same mistake again. But Yukito didn't even bother to look back. He just turned away, coldly saying he'd never help her again. Desperate, the girl grabbed his arm, insisting she was wrong and begging him to listen. But Yukito brushed her hand off with a sharp flick, telling her he was done with the whole thing. With that, he walked off, leaving both girls standing there, worried and speechless. Later at school, Yukito was nowhere to be found. His classmates started to notice his absence from every class. Mihu had been trying to reach him but got no replies, leaving him wondering what exactly had happened to Yukito. Just then, the short-haired girl barged into Yukito's classroom, boldly announcing that she was looking for him. The whole class went silent, surprised to see her there. That's when it was revealed. She wasn't just some random girl, she was actually the student council president. And to top it off, Yumi, the girl from the train incident, was the vice president. The room buzzed with whispers, everyone realizing this situation was way bigger than they thought. Meanwhile, Fujishiro, the teacher, was quietly enjoying lunch in the staff room when Mutsuki Kadu, the short-haired girl, stormed in, demanding to know everything about Yukito. Fujishiro blinked, confused by the sudden and random interrogation. But before she could even give a proper answer, Mutsuki, clearly out of patience, grabbed Fujishiro by the neck, practically choking her as she insisted on knowing Yukito's whereabouts. Once Fujishiro managed to calm her down and heard the full story of Mutsuki's messy encounter with Yukito, it finally clicked why he hadn't shown up to school. Mutsuki admitted the whole thing was her fault, looking surprisingly regretful. Meanwhile, Fujishiro sighed in relief that the drama hadn't spiraled into something worse. If things had escalated any further, it might have gotten so getting rid of someone. Mutsuki pressed Fujishiro once more, asking if she really didn't know where Yukito had gone. Fujishiro shook her head, saying he hadn't reached out to her either, but maybe Yuri could help. The moment Mutsuki heard that name, it hit her. Yukito was Yuri's younger brother. Yumi quickly nudged Mutsuki, insisting they track down Yuri together. Meanwhile, Fujishiro offered to call Yuri over the school broadcast. As the announcement echoed through the halls, Mutsuki's nerves spiked. She could feel the tension crawling up her spine, knowing this mess was only about to get way worse. Her mind replayed Yukito's bitter words, the moment he said he regretted helping her. The weight of it crushed her chest. She realized how badly she had warped Yukito's sense of justice, twisting it into something ugly and unfair. The truth was obvious. Yukito had done nothing wrong. The blame was all hers. And the way things ended up, she'd not only hurt him, she'd betrayed his good intentions. Mutsuki knew if she didn't fix this now, she might never get another chance. If she let this slide, she wouldn't just lose Yukito's trust, she'd lose her own belief in what was right. The moment Yuri heard what happened, she completely lost it and nearly swung a punch at Mutsuki. Fujishiro quickly stepped in, trying to calm her down and suggesting she try calling Yukito since they usually commuted together. But of course, on the one day she needed him close, they hadn't gone to school together. Frustrated, Yuri dialed his number, and luckily he answered. Yukito casually mentioned he was by the sea. That alone sent alarms ringing in Yuri's head. In disbelief, she asked if he was thinking of doing something reckless. Yukito brushed it off, saying he was just looking for something he lost and would head home soon. Still, something felt off. When Yuri asked if he was okay, his reply was unsettling. Out of nowhere, he told her to just wait until she hit high school. After that, she wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. Yuri froze. The pieces started clicking into place and her heart dropped. No way, it couldn't be what she thought. It was way too soon for him to just vanish from her life like that. Desperate, she yelled at him through the phone, begging him to stop, telling him that this wasn't what she had meant. But before she could say more, Yukito ended the call with a simple promise that he'd head home. Afterward, Fujishiro gently checked if Yuri was okay, but she barely acknowledged her. Instead, Yuri just announced that Yukito said he'd be back and they could deal with everything tomorrow. Then, without looking back, she walked toward the door, leaving only one final cold statement behind. She would never forgive Mutsuki. Meanwhile, while everyone else was drowning in anxiety and guilt, Yukito was chilling by the sea, casually snacking on some sweet tarts. It took Yukito about 30 minutes to reach the sea, but once he arrived, he felt a sense of relief. He even managed to grab a small souvenir for himself and someone else. Skipping school made him feel like a true delinquent. Kokonoe Yukito, the resident troublemaker, living up to his reputation. Before heading back home, he figured he might as well return a lost item he'd found nearby. He'd heard that Japan's return rate for lost things hovered around 60%, and it made him wonder if there'd ever be a day when he could reclaim what he'd lost too. At some point, Yukito had lost his sense of goodwill. No matter how much kindness people showed him, he couldn't return it. The warmth he once felt, the emotions of love and attachment, they were all gone. He figured it was better not to get too close to anyone. Otherwise, he'd just end up dragging them down with him. At least, that's the story he kept telling himself. As he glanced down at his phone, he noticed his screen lighting up with notifications. People were looking for him. A lot of people. And he couldn't wrap his head around why anyone would care. Even someone as invisible as him still somehow managed to hurt others. Yukito tilted his head back, eyes on the sky, realizing he'd ended up causing pain yet again. Meanwhile, back at school, Yuri wandered aimlessly through the halls, completely lost in her thoughts after her phone call with Yukito. He still remembered those words she'd said to him when they were kids, and honestly, so did she. The memory still clung to her hands like a stain, and Yukito's face from that day was burned into her mind. He never brought it up, and Yuri lived in fear that anyone might discover the truth. Because that day she had tried to kill her own brother, a sin she could never take back. As a child, Yukito shared an inseparable bond with his older sister Yuri. With their mother constantly busy, Yuri often found herself looking after him. But she never minded because it felt natural and she adored her baby brother. Still, Yuri was just a kid herself, trying to balance love and attention. Her best friend back then, Maki, was an only child, so she frequently joined in on their playtime. Yukito was always part of the fun. But one afternoon, Maki offhandedly remarked that Yukito was so adorable she wished he could be her little brother. That single comment rattled Yuri. Suddenly, it felt like Yukito was stealing Maki away from her, and Maki was taking Yukito for herself. Twisted in a knot of jealousy and possessiveness, Yuri grew resentful, aiming most of her anger at Yukito. To her, he was the thief who took her best friend. Then, on a seemingly normal day, Yukito asked Yuri to play. But instead of agreeing, Yuri, overwhelmed by bitterness, lashed out. She shoved him and screamed for him to disappear. Yukito, blindsided by the outburst, fell from the monkey bars. The betrayal hit him before the ground did. By the time Yuri snapped back to reality, it was too late. Rushing to his side, she found him lying unconscious, his small body bloodied. Panicked, Yuri ran home and confessed everything to their mother. But when they hurried back to the park, Yukito was gone. 6 days later, they found him in a hospital. The police had brought him in, but no one could explain the gap in time. When Yuri and her mom saw him again, exhaustion clung to his pale, innocent face. As soon as he woke, their mother pulled him into a tearful embrace. Yuri could only stare, realizing the full weight of what she'd done. His injuries were severe and it was all her fault. And then, as if to shatter what little strength she had left, Yukito quietly whispered that he was sorry for not being able to disappear. Yuri froze. His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She was the one who should have been apologizing. Yukito was innocent, and he'd done nothing wrong. It wasn't until years later that Yuri finally understood what he'd meant. He hadn't just left the playground that day. He almost left the world. When she told him to disappear, she only meant to push him away, not for him to die. Ever since that moment, Yuri never stopped apologizing, whether out loud or silently in her heart. Every time she looked at him, at the quiet, distant person he became, the guilt returned. But Yukito never once got angry. It was like that emotion had been drained from him. Over time, piece by piece, his emotions faded. The brother she loved slowly withered into someone unrecognizable. Yuri wanted to be punished for what she did. She wanted to cry, to scream, to somehow fix the past. She wished they could start over, that Yukito could look at her and call her his sister the way he used to. But by the time they made it to high school, she realized the truth. Yukito really had disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally. Her words had carved out a part of him she could never get back. But even so, Yuri made herself a promise. No matter what, she'd save him. With her own hands, she'd bring him back. Meanwhile, at school, a furious girl came looking for Yukito. Mihu called Yukito over, who was unaware of the chaos that was about to unfold. The next day at school, word spread like wildfire that the student council president was confronting Yukito over in Class B. Naturally, the whole school stampeded over to see the drama unfold. Yukito, meanwhile, found himself face to face with Mutsuki and Yumi, the same girls who just yesterday accused him of preying on an innocent woman. Turns out they were the president and vice president. Breaking the silence, Yumi turned to Mutsuki, asking if she was really going through with her plan. Yukito, on high alert, braced himself for whatever chaos was coming next. Then, out of nowhere, both girls dropped to the floor and bowed deeply, apologizing to him in front of everyone. The crowd was shocked. Phones were out, videos were rolling. Yukito couldn't help but feel like some feudal lord or something. He awkwardly told them to get up, saying their apology scene was way too dramatic. Mutsuki insisted she genuinely wanted to say sorry for what they did, and Yumi thanked him for helping her out. But Yukito wasn't having it. He turned away, saying he was over it. Mutsuki pushed back, saying they couldn't just leave things like this and wanted to make it up to him somehow. However, Yukito simply didn't care about what they had to say. Not wanting to leave things unresolved, Mutsuki suddenly blurted out her solution. She offered to let Yukito hug her. Yep, straight up hug. Bonus points if the goods were as advertised. Yumi, horrified at her friend's wild idea, quickly tried to suggest they treat Yukito to a nice meal instead. But Yukito definitely heard the first offer loud and clear. Now curious, he acted coy, pretending he didn't catch it and asked Mutsuki to repeat herself. Flustered beyond belief, Mutsuki awkwardly confessed it was her first time. Mutsuki told Yukito she would still accept him even if he didn't want to use protection, leaving Yumi completely horrified. Still, Mutsuki confidently claimed she was fine with doing it without any protection at all. Meanwhile, Yukito was just left speechless. On the bright side, at least the vice president seemed like a normal and decent person. Then Mutsuki reassured Yumi that she was fully aware of what she was saying, which honestly made it even worse. She explained that based on her research, this kind of offer would make any high school boy happy. Feeling secondhand embarrassment, Yukito covered Mutsuki's mouth to stop her from rambling. Mutsuki went on to say that she almost made a mistake that could have ruined Yukito's life. Since it was her fault, she felt it wouldn't be fair unless she was willing to risk something just as serious. Out of nowhere, Mutsuki revealed a pair of giant melons and begged Yukito to accept her offer. Some people are just God's favorites. However, Yukito turned her down, telling her that most people wouldn't exactly feel happy if someone came at them like that. Mutsuki admitted it was hard to believe but understood his point. Meanwhile, Yumi quickly pulled Mutsuki's vest down, scolding her and telling her to calm down because she was acting completely out of control. Mutsuki desperately clung to Yukito, saying she still felt the need to apologize. Seeing her like that, Yukito remembered the saying about how it's shameful for a man not to eat well, but honestly, he wasn't hungry. In fact, a normal meal wouldn't satisfy him at all. Wanting to get out of the awkward situation, Yukito suddenly dashed toward the door, claiming he needed to go shopping. Rather than giving in to any temptations, he decided it was better to just escape. Mutsuki tried to follow, but Yukito managed to get away. The next day at school, everyone stared at Yukito as he walked through the halls. Word had spread about what happened with Mutsuki and how she offered to be friends with benefits. People whispered, wondering if they had already done something, while others were impressed by Yukito's supposed charm. Yukito actually enjoyed the attention, now being called the third-year Casanova. But at the same time, he couldn't help but sigh since it sounded pretty cringe when people said it out loud. If his mentality wasn't strong, he knew he'd probably be in serious trouble. He could only sulk, realizing that his ideal student life was slipping further and further away. And that day, things only got worse. Later on, Mihu noticed that Yukito seemed distracted and asked what was bothering him. Yukito explained that he found a letter in his shoe locker, and he suspected it might be a love letter. Instantly, everyone's attention shifted to Yukito, eagerly waiting for him to open it. Before he even checked the letter, Yukito caught sight of Mihu's overly excited face, which annoyed him. Then Mineta asked if it was really a love letter, but Yukito ignored her as he was busy arguing with Mihu, who was literally gossiping about him right next to him. As Yukito tried to dodge Kamishiro and Mineta's questions, the rest of the class started whispering and even tweeting about him, which irritated him the most. Yukito wondered why everyone was suddenly paying so much attention to him. He was supposed to be living a quiet, low-key life, but now it felt like the complete opposite. Mihu then asked what the letter said. Yukito held it up and admitted he wasn't sure, but it felt like trouble. When Mihu read it, the letter asked Yukito to meet someone in the study room. Later, Yukito met Hasamura from Class C. She had gone to the same junior high as him and asked if he remembered her. Yukito honestly didn't, but Hasamura brushed it off and kept talking. She explained that this wasn't technically their first time meeting, but they had never talked like this before. Then she got straight to the point. She wanted Yukito to stay away from Kamishiro. Hasamura was Kamishiro's best friend, and ever since Yukito got involved with her, Kamishiro had become depressed. It was painful to watch, and Hasamura was genuinely worried about her. Yukito asked what exactly she expected him to do, leaving Hasamura a bit speechless. He explained that he never forced Kamishiro to do anything. In fact, he'd already told her multiple times to leave him alone, but she never listened. That's why he was asking for advice now. What else could he do? Hasamura started tearing up, asking if it was really that simple to just give up on Kamishiro. She revealed that Kamishiro had chosen this high school just to follow Yukito, all because she really liked him. After everything, why couldn't he just return her feelings? Yukito should at least understand that much. But Yukito shook his head and told her she was wrong. Smiling a bit, he reassured Hasamura that he'd try again to leave Kamishiro behind for good. Then he left the room, leaving Hasamura desperate to explain that this wasn't what she wanted. Things weren't supposed to turn out like this, but Yukito was determined. This time he was going to make sure Kamishiro understood. Staying apart was for the best, and he'd be clear about it. Yukito thought back to the times he spent with Kamishiro, realizing that those moments were genuinely enjoyable. Maybe he was just overwhelmed when he tried to reject her back then, but now that was all in the past, something he couldn't go back to. The next day, a third-year student named Hasamura introduced himself to the class and asked where Yukito was. Yukito immediately felt uneasy, sensing where this was going. When Yukito identified himself, he asked why Toshiro was looking for him. Toshiro explained that he was the captain of the basketball club. Hearing that, Yukito tried to brush him off by pretending he was someone else and claiming the real Yukito was in the cafeteria. Toshiro, unfazed, told him to stop joking. Toshiro then mentioned that Hayakuma had asked him to invite Yukito to join the basketball team. Yukito was surprised, wondering why Hayakuma was still getting involved even after graduating. After a brief pause, Yukito's expression shifted. He became more serious, telling Toshiro plainly that if he had any intention of joining the team, he would have done so from the very start. To him, throwing himself into club activities felt pointless, just another distraction, another way to avoid facing the reality of his own broken feelings. But despite Yukito's blunt response, Toshiro didn't back off. Instead, he met Yukito's seriousness with determination of his own. He admitted that yes, their team wasn't exactly strong, and realistically, they didn't have much of a chance to win anything big. Still, that didn't change the fact that this was their final year. After putting in 3 years of hard work, Toshiro wanted to give everything he had left in their last tournament. And for that, he needed Yukito's help. He wasn't just offering an invitation, he was asking for Yukito to lend him his strength. Toshiro informed Yukito that the basketball club only had 9 members, meaning he could start immediately if he joined. However, Yukito couldn't help but think about how the team's situation starkly contrasted with the popular manga that had taken the Reiwa era by storm. This wasn't a story about underdogs rising to greatness. Their team was simply small and weak. Just then, Toshiro threw an unexpected question at him, asking if there was someone Yukito wanted to impress by doing well in the tournament. Without hesitation, Yukito dismissed the idea, stating he had no one in mind, because frankly, there was no one like that in his life. To Yukito's surprise, Toshiro suddenly declared that he, on the other hand, did have someone special he wanted to impress and confess to. Realization hit Yukito like a brick. So this was Toshiro's true motive all along. Annoyed by the revelation, Yukito brushed him off, telling him he could do whatever he wanted, but Toshiro wasn't done yet. With an unwavering stare, he pointed at Yukito and issued a challenge. They would settle things on the court. The weight of the situation settled heavily on Yukito. This reckless, hot-blooded idiot was dragging him into an absurd spectacle. And to make matters worse, the entire class had turned their full attention to them. The pressure mounted when Mihu chimed in, urging Yukito to accept the challenge. Soon after, Kamishiro joined in, adding to the pressure, practically demanding that Yukito say yes. The excitement in the room escalated as they even pulled in another student, a boy named Saito, encouraging him to join the team as well. As the classroom buzzed with energy, Yukito suddenly realized something. His own opinion in this matter had become completely irrelevant. It was as if the entire class had collectively decided his fate without him having any say in it. The murmurs and shouts grew louder, and before he could even process what was happening, the students had already begun hyping up a game scheduled for after school. Frustrated and unwilling to be swept up in their enthusiasm, Yukito made one thing clear. They could go ahead and play without him. Despite his refusal, word of the impending basketball showdown spread rapidly throughout the school, fueling even more excitement. Soon, the news reached the ears of the girls in Yuri's class. They eagerly gossiped about it, marveling at how Yukito had once made the student council president bow to him, and was now taking on the basketball team captain. One of the girls found the whole situation ridiculous, while another was still reeling from the idea that Mutsuki had ever bowed before Yukito. As the chatter continued, Yuri, growing increasingly irritated, snapped at them for treating it like some sort of entertainment spectacle. She reminded them that this wasn't a joke, nor was it something to be casually discussed like idle gossip. The more she thought about the upcoming match, the more frustrated she became. It stirred up emotions she had long suppressed, and before she knew it, she was storming out of the classroom in an attempt to clear her head. As she made her way to the vending machine, she couldn't stop herself from recalling how devoted Yukito had been to basketball back in middle school. Back then, she had found him incredibly cool, and now, she couldn't help but wonder, would she ever get to see him play like that again? Meanwhile, back on the court, Yukito was just trying to stretch without losing his will to live. But the whispers around him made it impossible to ignore the growing rumors. The students speculated that he had slept with Mutsuki and was now wagering a girl over a basketball match. Before he knew it, he had earned the reputation of the school's ultimate playboy. Its very own Casanova. The rumors are evolving faster than Pokemon. The absurdity of it all made Yukito sigh in frustration. He reasoned that these students were likely just latching onto any drama to break the monotony of their lives. Yet, despite wanting to remain a bystander, he had somehow ended up in the spotlight. Groaning at the situation, he wished he could just go home. But whether he liked it or not, he had to face the challenge ahead. The match was set. A 3-on-3 game against 3 regular members of the basketball team. The format was simple. An alternating offense-defense system split into 2 5-minute periods totaling 10 minutes. Before the match even began, Toshiro with a devilish grin laid down the stakes. If Yukito's team lost, they would have to join the basketball club. Mihu readily agreed, much to Yukito's horror. Internally, Yukito screamed at Mihu for making decisions on his behalf, especially since Toshiro wasn't even that big of a deal on the basketball team. Annoyed, Yukito decided to set his own terms. If his team won, the basketball club had to disband. The moment the words left his mouth, Toshiro and his teammates dramatically collapsed onto the floor, wailing that his demand was way too extreme. Yukito found their reaction ridiculous. Why would third years be so quick to assume they would lose to a first year in the first place? Yukito had no idea if Mihu or Saito were any good at basketball. Not that it mattered. He had no real motivation to play anyway, and he simply didn't care. While Yukito sulked at the thought, Mihu and Saito were hyping themselves up, brimming with excitement. Mihu in particular seemed prepared to accept defeat, knowing they were up against seniors. However, just as he was getting ready to accept the inevitable, a sinister grin spread across Mihu's face. With a sudden burst of confidence, he declared that they would definitely win. Something tells me he's about to break Toshiro's neck. Yukito, watching this unexpected shift in Mihu's demeanor, felt a shiver crawl up his spine. As the game kicked off, Yukito found himself at the center of it all. He prepared for his first shot, and for a brief moment a realization washed over him. Never once had he thought he would play basketball at school again. The sport had once been his escape, something he did for himself. It was never for his teammates or the sake of camaraderie, and that was why he always practiced alone. But then, in the summer of his second year, everything changed. Someone had entered his life. Someone who refused to leave him alone, who persistently spoke to him, who saw him in ways others hadn't. That person was none other than Shiori Kamishiro, and she had confessed to him. Kamishiro first noticed Yukito playing basketball alone, just as he had been the week before. On a quiet weekend at the park, she found herself attracted to the sight of him practicing alone. That was the first day she truly became conscious of him. From then on, her eyes began to follow him. Maybe that was a mistake. Once she started being conscious about him, she began to realize his abnormality. He practiced both in the mornings and after school, always alone. Even the other club members were confused by him. Even though everyone was doing things slowly, there was a feeling of a foreign body mixed in. There was only one person who was serious. Yukito didn't care about that kind of atmosphere, and he never asked the other to make the same effort as him. One day, unable to hold back her curiosity, Kamishiro finally approached him, asking why he worked so hard. But Yukito only stared at her, expressionless, and asked who she was. Sis got humbled real quick. Embarrassment hit her instantly. She ran off, her chest tight with frustration, hiding where Yukito couldn't see her. Just then, a young man appeared, asking what had happened. That small moment of concern was enough to lift her spirits. Apparently, Kamishiro is quite popular. She could feel the eyes of boys on her, and she had been confessed to several times. However, Yukito was different. He didn't even intend to look at her like that. She wondered what reflected in those eyes of his. They were dark and stagnant, coldly staring at something. However, his attitude and words were always kind. Yukito was an unbalanced and strange existence that couldn't be left alone. One time, while they were playing basketball together, he handed her a bottle of water without a word, his face unreadable. At that moment, Kamishiro wondered what she could do to get him interested in her. From that day forward, she started following him around. She peeked into the comics he was reading and greeted him every time he entered class. Before she knew it, Yukito became a presence that made her feel safe. He was an important friend of the opposite sex, but in reality, she wanted to be more than that, and it didn't take long. There was an opportunity for Yukito's presence to change significantly within the club. In the fall tournament of the second year, they defeated a strong school and advanced to the top 16 of the prefectural tournament. The basketball club, who usually lost in the early stages of the district tournament, was awarded by the school for their great achievement. This was Yukito's great achievement. The results greatly changed the mindset of the boys. If they could get better, they could aim higher. They began to seriously devote themselves to basketball. Yukito single-handedly changed the basketball team. The heat and the aftermath were transmitted to the female team as well. One of the girls suddenly started talking about Yukito, convinced that he was kinda cool. Another girl agreed, saying that he was not flirtatious like the other boys. Another added that he always practiced alone until late and he was quite stoic. The focus then shifted to Kamishiro, and they thought it was nice that she was close with him. Kamishiro tried to act cool about it, but in reality she was feeling a little superior and anxious at the same time. As expected, Yukito became popular. One day, as Kamishiro was mindlessly walking the school corridors, she noticed Yukito with a girl. At first, Kamishiro wasn't really sure about her feelings, but then she realized that she truly did want to be with Yukito. She wanted him to stay with her, and that feeling only kept growing. She held her chest tightly, realizing that she might actually be in love with him. One day, she decided to confess to him, telling him that she loved him. Yukito was surprised, and it was the first time that she witnessed him make such an expression. However, Yukito only apologized to Kamishiro, telling her to wait until the end of the tournament for his reply. She was a bit dismayed, but then she agreed, realizing that it was the last tournament after all. Yukito promised to reply once he was done with the tournament, and Kamishiro understood that. Just then, she started running, yelling to Yukito that she didn't want to be sad. Kamishiro only heard it once. The reason why Yukito started playing basketball. His childhood friend dumped him, and he wanted to cut off the feeling of love that still remained. Soon after, the last tournament finally came. Kamishiro was sure that was the goal Yukito set for himself. That was the time he needed to sort out his feelings. Elsewhere, Kamishiro was breathless from running. She thought that if he didn't care about her, he wouldn't put his answer on hold. She was sure of it. Yukito would give her the answer she wanted. Before all the chaos went down, two of Kamishiro's friends asked her if she confessed to Yukito. She panicked and quickly denied everything, claiming that there was nothing between them. One of her friends refused to believe her, asking why she was in such a hurry and was flustered. One of her friends then sighed, wondering if it was finally springtime for Kamishiro. Hearing this, Kamishiro's mind went blank. This was her first love, and it was a very important and sweet feeling for her. As her friends continued to make fun of her, Kamishiro decided upon herself that she didn't want her first love to be a mockery. She didn't want to be hurt, and so she blurted out something unspeakable. She said that she and Yukito weren't together because she couldn't be with someone who had an awful aura. She claimed to only feel sorry for him because he was always alone, and that was why she wanted to help him. Her friend pressed on, asking if she didn't like him. Kamishiro was tense, saying it wasn't like that and that she didn't really care about Yukito. At that moment, the atmosphere shifted. Her friend's expressions changed, and as Kamishiro turned around, she saw Yukito already walking away. Damn, bro popped up at the worst time possible. Panic gripped her. Why was he even here? Had he heard everything? Her mind went blank, unable to recall the exact words she had spoken. Her friends called out to him, but he didn't stop. They began to blame themselves, realizing that their teasing might have caused this mess. One of them then hesitantly asked Kamishiro if she truly hadn't confessed. If she weren't honest, she might end up in a lot of trouble. Meanwhile, Kamishiro was still unable to believe what had happened. As much as she wanted to chase after Yukito, her own feet betrayed her, and she couldn't move them. She suddenly became in denial, hoping that Yukito didn't hear everything she said. In that case, she told herself to let the issue be and not do anything about it. However, she suddenly realized that Yukito might ask for clarifications, which only made her worry more. At that moment, Kamishiro was left with no answers, and her impatience only grew. No matter how many days had passed since then, she never addressed the problem with Yukito. On the surface, there was no change in Yukito's behavior. He was always kind and cool, like he'd always been. However, she could see the sadness in his eyes, and not even her own self-convincing could make her feel better. Unbeknownst to Kamishiro, the lies she told continued spreading without her knowing. One afternoon, Kamishiro casually mentioned that the tournament was approaching. Yukito responded as usual, showing no reaction that might alarm her, which somehow made her feel safe. Just then, she brought up her confession, saying she would wait for his reply. Out of nowhere, Yukito told her she didn't need to hang out with him anymore. He clarified that he wasn't actually lonely and that he preferred being alone. She didn't have to feel sorry for him, and if she didn't like him, she should quit bothering herself. Kamishiro tensed up, momentarily feigning confusion. But then Yukito met her gaze directly and told her she didn't need to lie to him. Kamishiro covered her mouth in shock, immediately regretting that she asked. Before she could say anything, Yukito turned away and without hesitation gave his answer, no. Desperate, Kamishiro ran after him, insisting that he was wrong and that it wasn't her intention. But Yukito only replied that if walking home with him had been such a burden, it was best to end things right there. He bluntly told her, calling her formally. Kamishiro was shocked, as it felt like she was back at the beginning. Despite her disappointment, she continued chasing him down the stairs, claiming that she truly liked him. But in her rush, she lost her footing and stumbled. Yukito reacted instantly, catching her just in time. In his concern, he called out her first name, Shiori. At that moment, Kamishiro felt a bittersweet happiness upon hearing her name from his lips. Moments later, they both lay on the ground, motionless. Yukito was the first to react, waking Kamishiro and asking if she was all right. She was, but when she saw what had happened to Yukito, her relief turned to dread. His arm was broken, swelling rapidly. In that instant, she realized the harsh truth. Yukito would no longer be able to participate in the tournament. At the present, Yukito wondered if things would have been different if he were able to participate in the tournament at the time. He then asked himself if it was possible to get anything back, but he didn't even know the answer to that anymore. At least the relationship between him and Kamishiro should have been made clear. Yukito shrugged and tried to redirect his focus on the game. He was curious to see how good Mihu was at basketball, since he seemed confident to drag him into this mess. The game kicked off, and in a flash, Mihu seized control, stealing the ball with remarkable ease. His dribbling was fluid, and he leapt into the air, slamming the ball through the hoop. The crowd erupted, particularly the girls, their cheers ringing across the court. Yukito, however, remained unimpressed. He narrowed his eyes, thinking that being as good-looking as Mihu had to be cheating in some form. As the game pressed on, an opposing player attempted a pass, but Yukito was faster and he intercepted the ball with ease. Every time they tried to pass or score, Yukito was already there, anticipating their moves and stealing the ball. Yukito realized that although the seniors' bodies were large, their movements were not sophisticated. He could immediately see their next action with a mere glance. Yukito was convinced that these men were weak. Just then he tried passing the ball to his teammate Ito, but he missed it. Annoyed, Yukito sarcastically dribbled the ball before his senior, asking if he still felt like doing the game. Knowing what was at stake, his senior refused. Just then, Mihu stole the ball from Yukito, slamming it into the ring. Yukito warned him that if he kept doing that, they would definitely win. However, Mihu understood what exactly he was doing. Just then, Mihu executed a particularly skillful maneuver, stealing the ball from his opponent. It was only then that Yukito noticed Mihu's experienced movements. Instead of being flattered, Mihu got offended by how long it had taken Yukito to notice. He asked if Yukito even thought about what he felt, but in reality, Yukito simply didn't know what this refreshingly handsome guy felt. What Yukito was not good at in the Japanese language were problems where he had to identify the author's feelings, even when it was based on writing. Once during a test, he had been asked to determine the author's emotions, but his best guess was that the author needed to use the restroom. As expected, his teacher got really angry. Soon after, silence hung heavy in the air. The game had been utterly one-sided and incredibly boring. Hearing that he was bored, Mihu pointed at Yukito, challenging him to play against him. Yukito asked Mihu if his head was alright, then he reminded him that he can't have everything just because he was a handsome guy. However, Mihu pressed on, saying that it would be boring if they continued the game. Just then, Mihu turned to Toshiro, telling him that he was joining their team and that they should find someone to replace him. Toshiro told him not to go ahead with his own story, but Mihu broke it to him that he couldn't win against them. Toshiro was stunned, unable to believe that a first year was telling him this. Meanwhile, Yukito stood there unamused, wondering why everyone was just ignoring him. Mihu, on the other hand, smiled devilishly because he had been waiting for this moment. During his junior high school days, Mihu was in a basketball club, and it was considered a powerhouse. District tournaments were nothing more than a stepping stone. One day, they had a game against an opponent from a weak school, and no one doubted that they would win by a large margin. He believed that the opposing team were people they shouldn't even need to worry about. That was how it was supposed to be. However, a few minutes after it started, Mihu's perception completely changed. One student glared at the court with deep, emotionless eyes. He controlled everything. Mihu couldn't understand anything, their pasts were cut, and this mysterious opponent didn't fall for any feints. Mihu watched closely, but before he knew it, the student's passes had been made. He had the strength of a monster, but no matter how much he scored, he never showed a shred of joy. He was like a machine, seemingly abnormal. However, the other players were average, making for a distorted team composition. Only that one man stood out, and yet Mihu was overwhelmed with defeat and humiliation. He scoffed at the thought that they were the powerhouse. As Mihu was filled with despair, he wondered what the national tournament would be like. He knew that he couldn't go nationwide if he didn't defeat this man. He was frustrated, and so he decided to beat him. To defeat that man had been his goal, as well as the whole basketball club. He attended with great enthusiasm at the last tournament of his third year. However, that guy didn't come. They went to the nationals and made it to the third round. The progress of the advancement was great, and the school and those around them were happy with the progress they made. However, in the basketball club, something that couldn't be explained continued to smolder. They didn't defeat their greatest opponent, so what was the point of going all over the country? They remained defeated, and Mihu lost his chance to defeat that man. Now, standing on the court, Mihu wanted to believe in something called fate. After longing for Yukito, they finally met again. If one asked, Mihu believed they were like lovers. Just kiss already, bro. As Mihu took hold of the ball, he told himself that this was it. A pass that made it look like the ball suddenly appeared in front of him. It couldn't be helped that Ito missed it, as it was impossible after all. The seniors would never be able to stop their team with his and Yukito's strength. Suddenly, Yukito remarked that the game was boring, leaving Mihu surprised. Mihu agreed, but he wanted to play with Yukito for as long as possible. He suddenly challenged Yukito to fight him, claiming he would win against him this time. Yukito couldn't say anything, merely uttering Mihu's name awkwardly. He asked if he was really that hot-blooded, but Mihu dismissed the question and said he wanted to play basketball with him. Yukito bluntly replied he didn't want to, stunning Mihu. Yukito apologized, saying he didn't think he would be able to live up to his expectations. Without hesitation, Mihu upped the stakes, pointing toward Kamishiro. If he won, she would be his prize. The statement sent shockwaves through the crowd. Everyone was stunned except for Yukito. Kamishiro was flustered, asking Mihu what he meant. Meanwhile, Yukito was lost in his own thoughts, surprised that Mihu liked Kamishiro. Just then, Yukito told Kamishiro that this was great, as Mihu was a good guy. Yukito really handed her off like an expired coupon. Mihu was annoyed, asking if it were really okay with him. Yukito was confused, asking why Mihu was so worried when he said it himself. He asked if it was really necessary to have a match, considering that the rest was up to them both. Frustrated, Mihu asked Yukito why he didn't notice him. He asked if he really felt nothing. He brought up Kamishiro and Suzurikawa, pointing out that he didn't think anything of their behavior. However, instead of addressing Mihu, Yukito simply turned away, saying that he didn't understand and that he wished him and Kamishiro well. Just then, Mihu asked Yukito why he rejected people so harshly. Just then, Yukito stopped in his tracks, saying that he doesn't reject but is the one always being rejected. All he wanted was to disappear. Mihu's words made Yukito ponder if he had truly been rejecting people. It couldn't be, as he should have been the one being rejected. He asked himself if this were really true. It made him think about the time when Kamishiro confessed to him. It was not sympathy nor a lie, but a confession. That day, Kamishiro was sure that she loved him. Yukito started crying, feeling like he lost something important. It was a familiar feeling, as if the hollow had just expanded. There was something else, and it sounded like something in him broke. Then out of nowhere, Yukito acted nonchalantly and said he didn't care. Just then, he said that if he won that match, then neither Mihu nor Kamishiro would have anything to do with him. It was now up to them both from then on out, and he would have no concern for them anymore. He won't even have to join the basketball club. This was the perfect plan that would solve everything. Mihu expressed his confusion, but Yukito was already ready to play. Yukito thought to himself that with this, Kamishiro and Mihu would be able to deepen their relationship without hesitation. He never thought that at his age he could become the bridge of love. At this point, he needs to not just touch grass, but eat it. Just then, Ito voiced out his concern, saying that he didn't want to play in a match like that. The rest of the seniors agreed with Ito, and they no longer wanted to play if they acted that way. Not wanting to back down, Yukito declared that he would be playing alone. Ito tried to protest, convincing Yukito to take a bit of rest. However, Yukito didn't listen, leaving everyone curious about what was about to unfold. For some reason, when Yukito played a basketball game, the venue often became quiet before he knew it. Penetrating gazes pierced through him as if he had become something strange. He knew those eyes should be won him. However, despite being stared at, Yukito's heart remained safe and calm. He told himself that no one wanted to do anything with him, and this was the correct way they should be towards him. Before Yukito could proceed with the game, Kamishiro stopped him, declaring that she wanted to join Yukito's team. Mihu was stunned, asking what she was talking about. Kamishiro apologized to him while running down the stairs, thanking him at the same time. When she reached the court, Mihu told her that he felt bad for getting her involved. He tried warning her about Yukito's behavior, but Kamishiro already knew about that. Just then, Kamishiro asked Yukito if he wanted to play with her one last time. Yukito, unfazed, asked Kamishiro if he was even listening to him. Kamishiro forced a smile, pointing out how sinful that line was. It was an act that ruined Yukito's kindness as he tried to push her away. Just then, she said she had no qualifications to be involved with him, but she was happy. Any reason would be fine as long as she could be his motivation, even if it was rejection. Yukito was now at the court again, and she was the reason for it. She couldn't be happier. Disappointment, abuse. Kamishiro deserved that instead of him. That was why she didn't want anyone to look at Yukito like that anymore. Even if this feeling didn't reach him, she wanted to be next to him. At that moment, she rested her head on Yukito's chest, telling him that she wanted him to win. Out of nowhere, Yukito reached out and wiped away Kamishiro's tears, reminding her not to cry if she was truly happy. Then, as if snapping back to reality, she frantically wiped the rest of her tears, realizing she had been embarrassing. But despite her best efforts to compose herself, the tears wouldn't stop. Yukito then told her that if she were with Mihu, she would never have to feel this kind of sadness. Mihu would surely make her happy. Kamishiro agreed that Mihu truly was a kind person, but she still liked Yukito and no one else. She held his hand, saying she would never deny that feeling again. This girl has the resilience of a pop-up ad. Just then, Kamishiro told Yukito that she loved him. Yukito suddenly slapped his forehead, much to Kamishiro's shock. Everyone else in the stadium was tuned into their conversation, and they were just as confused as Kamishiro. Turning his back to her, Yukito let out a sigh, wondering how things had escalated to this point. But instead of dwelling on it, he simply told Kamishiro to play the match with him. Kamishiro, still crying but now out of joy, eagerly agreed. Then, with a smirk, Yukito pointed toward Mihu, declaring that he was about to shoot down the guy who bragged about never watching TV. Mihu, utterly baffled, protested that he never even said such a thing. Ignoring him, Yukito added that for now there would be no complicated conditions. He would deal with him, so he should come at him. Mihu was fired up, ready to take on Yukito. However, before the game could begin, the seniors interrupted, asking for updates about the basketball club. Yukito only stared at them blankly before saying that he would see the manager. Later that day, the scoreboard flickered, casting an unshakable reality over the court. 0-4-21. A brutal gap, one that left players sprawled across the floor, drained of everything they had poured into the game. Mihu lay among them, saying it was impossible. He had trained relentlessly and fought in matches that had taken them all over the country. And yet, even with all that effort, he still wasn't enough. After the game, Yukito simply returned home feeling bored. But more than that, Mihu wondered why he couldn't get close to Yukito. He was so far away that no one could touch him. Just then, Mihu turned to Kamishiro, asking her why Yukito didn't participate in the third-year tournament. Kamishiro simply answered that Yukito broke a bone. Mihu asked if it was an injury, and Kamishiro answered that it was her fault. She lied to him, and because of that, Yuki just became a broken person. Elsewhere, Yukito was walking home when the sound of footsteps beside him signaled Yuri's quiet arrival. She handed him a bottle of water, a simple gesture for playing well. Yukito thanked her, then handed her money in exchange for the water. Even exchanges have never felt this personal. Yuri stared at the bill in disbelief, but Yukito barely acknowledged it. He simply noted how rare it was for her to walk home with him. Yuri eventually broke the silence, asking if he participated in any club activities and if they were fun. Yukito responded with disinterest, stating that he was bored and didn't join any clubs because he was a negative person. She accepted his answer, then asked if school was fun. Yukito pondered the question, unable to grasp how school could ever be considered fun. She further asked if he was confused, but Yukito simply said no. The quiet tension between them continued as they walked home. Silene was an awkward relationship, but it was fine. Yukito had always reminded himself not to get too close to his sister. That one tragic incident lingered in his mind, and he feared it was going to be just like that time. Just then, Yuri asked what he planned to do after high school. Yukito didn't understand the question, saying no one would really know. Suddenly, Yuri grabbed his hand, pleading with him not to go. Yukito asked where he would even go, and Yuri's response was simple. anywhere. Before he could react, she pulled him into a desperate embrace, telling him to stay by her side. Apologies spilled from her lips, saying she got more scared when he saw him earlier. Maybe it was already too late, but she still wanted to try. She begged him not to disappear, not to hurt himself, and not to alienate those around him. No matter what he believed, he should know that he was loved by many. Yukito immediately dismissed her words as a lie, but Yuri didn't waver. Yukito wondered what she was even talking about, because as far as he could remember, she said she hated him. Just then, Yuri smiled and said she loved him. She kissed him on the lips, leaving Yukito stunned. Hell nah, bro. As Yukito sat in class, his mind remained fixated on the fact that his sister kissed him. He wondered what even was that. He had never known Yuri to have a boyfriend, which was strange considering she was beautiful. It wouldn't have been surprising if she had 1, 2, or 20 boyfriends. Then, in an instant, a realization struck him, making everything clear. Without thinking, he abruptly stood from his seat and blurted out his conclusion. His sister was a bitch. Fujishiro, startled by his sudden outburst, quickly told him to shut up. Bro had a eureka moment. At that moment, Fujishiro also took notice of the class's unusually high average score, something that unsettled her slightly. Yukito, however, found it completely expected. The study sessions had been a resounding success, with more and more students joining each day. Mihu, standing nearby, informed Yukito that he had ranked third in the class and questioned whether he had actually studied. However, Yukito was not interested in talking to him, so he simply reminded Mr. Refreshingly Handsome Guy not to address him so casually. His mind then drifted back to the basketball match and, more importantly, Mihu's insistence on having it. In the grand scheme of things, it was useless. Just then, Mihu leaned in with an air of playful confidence, proudly announcing that he had placed 10th in the class. Yukito remained unimpressed, offering nothing more than a sarcastic acknowledgement. He then advised Mihu to be kinder to Kamishiro if he still wanted to remain friends with him. The continued references to the previous match seemed to aggravate Mihu, and he said he was getting angry. Meanwhile, Sakurai and Mineta sat nearby, both disheartened by their poor test scores. Rather than dwelling on their disappointing results, Sakurai decided to change the subject, asking if anyone wanted to make plans for Golden Week. Yukito casually mentioned that Mihu was being invited, to which Mihu pointed out that he was included as well. Yukito immediately dismissed the idea, insisting that there was no way he would be invited. After all, he was a lonely person. Frustrated, he told Mihu not to make such careless things. Mihu, caught off guard by Yukito's sudden temper, suggested that he just play along with it. Just then, Sakurai confirmed that Yukito was, in fact, invited. Yukito asked if she was serious and was kidding, but Sakurai only asked if it was truly that shocking. Yukito got tense, saying he wouldn't openly engage in exclusion. He then tried to justify his stance, saying that if they were going to exclude him, it should be behind the scenes. This was what he expected of Sakurai, which he called Elizabeth. Sakurai got offended, crying as she said she wouldn't do that. Mineta got upset as well, asking Yukito if he didn't want to go out with them. He clarified that wasn't the case, but was curious about what they were going to do. Mineta reassured him that it would be fun and urged him to at least consider it. As Yukito glanced at Mineta, something occurred to him. She was a girl, which made her the perfect person to ask the question that had been on his mind. Without hesitation, he turned to her and posed his blunt inquiry. "Is she a bitch?" Mineta recoiled, visibly offended, insisting that she wasn't a cheap woman. Mihu, on the other hand, felt like passing out, overwhelmed by his friend's absurdity. Realizing he might have been rude, Yukito offered an apology. Mineta barely acknowledged it and instead recalled that he had loudly called his sister the same thing earlier in class and demanded an explanation. She questioned whether that incident was related to the insensitive question he had just asked her. Yukito fell silent, contemplating her words before finally admitting the truth. His sister, Yuri, had kissed him the other day. As he became lost in thought, trying to process the meaning behind it, he failed to realize that the entire class had heard his confession. Suddenly, the room erupted with questions, everyone demanding to know what had actually happened. Feeling overwhelmed, Yukito left the classroom in search of a quiet place to eat. As he wandered the halls, he spotted Kyuka by the stairs, though she looked too irritated to acknowledge him. Rather than forcing a conversation, he simply sat down, content to mind his own business. He was convinced that everyone had days when they were in a bad mood. Turning his attention back to his meal, he inspected his usual combination: grape bread with cheese milk bread, the best combination. Just as he was about to take a bite, he realized Kyuka had moved closer, asking why he ignored her and started eating. Yukito exhaled, calling her a pain, but in an oddly good way. Amused, Kyuka let out a laugh, though she made it clear that she wasn't ready to forgive him just yet. Not that it mattered to him. She then recalled how she told him she would be waiting on that spot once or twice a week, but he never came. Yukito thought back, and the realization hit him. He had forgotten entirely. The past few days, he had simply been eating in the classroom without a second thought. Yukito decided to deceive her claiming that there were various things that happened. However, Kyuka didn't buy his excuse, knowing he simply forgot. Just then, Yukito asked if Kyuka came by every day, but she simply dismissed the thought and argued it was different. She claimed she just wanted to be alone once in a while and she never cared about him, not one bit. Hearing this, Yukito questioned whether Kyuka was as introverted as he was, but she warned him not to mix it up because she felt uncomfortable with such a label. Yukito thought he was a goddess, and he didn't even know her name. Kyuka was visibly offended, reminding him that she had already introduced herself. But Yukito, too preoccupied with his disappointment over the lackluster grapes in his bread, barely registered her frustration. Kyuka pressed him, asking if he was even listening or interested in her. She also made sure to point out that she was quite popular among the students. Without hesitation, Yukito bluntly asked if she was pretending to be a star. The remark caught Kyuka off guard, telling him to stop being mean because it was embarrassing. Sensing that she was upset again, Yukito awkwardly attempted to comfort her. Before their conversation could continue, they noticed Hinagi approaching with an unfamiliar boy. Kyuka immediately assumed a confession was about to take place and quickly pulled Yukito aside so they could watch in secret. As they hid, Yukito realized that Kyuka had probably been confessed to many times before, which only reinforced her claim about being popular. Out of nowhere, he made an offhand remark about how cheese milk bread was funny since it contained 2 dairy products. Kyuka, unimpressed by his random thought, became even more convinced that he had no real interest in talking to her. I swear this guy just needs to be diagnosed. Their attention shifted back to Hinagi and the boy as they eavesdropped on the interaction. Curious, Kyuka asked if Yukito knew them, and he confirmed that Hinagi was his classmate. She admitted that sneaking around like this felt a bit of a hassle but also exciting. Meanwhile, Yukito recalled that Hinagi had previously claimed to have broken up with her boyfriend, so it wasn't surprising that she might be embarking on a new love. As they listened, Kyuka confessed she was nervous. She also commented on how cute Hinagi was, but wondered what had happened to her. Yukito, sensing an opportunity to tease, asked if she was implying that she was prettier than Hinagi. He also pointed out that lunch was already over. Pissed, Kyuka thought she really needed to settle things with him. As the two of them returned to their classrooms, they remained oblivious to the fact that a mysterious girl had been silently following them the entire time. Later that day, a girl from Yuri's social circle attempted to feed Yukito a snack, but before he could take it, Yuri swiftly intervened. She told Yukito to eat her, which was just entirely different. Yuri fed her the snack and Yukito had no choice but to open his mouth. Yukito had been called by his sister after school and was treated like a pet in the second-year classroom. Just then, a girl curiously asked Yuri if Yukito was the rumored younger brother, as he didn't look like her. Yukito jokingly agreed, which only irritated Yuri. She then reminded the girl that her comment had once made their mother cry, prompting the girl to apologize. Shifting topics, Yuri asked Yukito about the rumors regarding the student body president. She wanted to know how much of it was true. Realizing this was his chance to dispel the rumors, Yukito confidently announced that it was a total hoax. He insisted that the president didn't intend to kneel down and tell him to become her special friend. However, he did admit that she had knelt before him, asking him to become a friend. Yuri was left speechless, while another girl asked if there was even any difference. Yukito argued that there was, but everyone was doubtful. He pointed out that the order was different, but the girls insisted it was hardly true. Outraged, Yuri said she would recall that girl. She then instructed her friends to prepare for a vote of confidence immediately. Meanwhile, Yukito scrambled to de-escalate the situation, saying the president didn't say anything like that at all. One of Yuri's friends, visibly tense, hesitated before agreeing with him, stating that the president would never say something like that. After all, a rumor was just a rumor. Just then, Yukito suddenly recalled the president's exact words, "Embrace me." The other girl was stunned, saying that it wouldn't be a rumor if he were saying it. Another one of Yuri's friends pointed out that a shocking truth had just been revealed, and she asked what they should do about the current atmosphere. Just then, Yuri asked Yukito for his thoughts. Weighing the situation, Yukito estimated that their chances of success were about 50-50, given that the president was undeniably beautiful. Nevertheless, he firmly stated that he would not give in to her temptation. Yuri assumed she was the reason for his resolve, forcing Yukito to agree. He definitely had no freedom of speech. At that moment, one of the girls casually asked how Yuri was doing at home, while another brought up her popularity. Yukito acknowledged it with a simple response. Meanwhile, Yuri declared that she wasn't happy, prompting one of her friends to tease her about her disinterest. Yukito then remarked that he was glad Yuri was liked and popular. His words immediately brightened her mood, confirming that she actually was popular. She hugged Yukito tightly, telling him to continue looking forward to it. As the other girls watched the scene unfold, they couldn't help but comment on how Yuri was completely weak when it came to her brother. At that moment, one of the girls curiously asked what Yukito and Yuri were like at home. Without hesitation, Yukito casually stated that Yuri was always in her underwear. Embarrassed, Yuri immediately threatened to sleep in his bed that night if he talked about it any further. Unfazed, Yukito went on to reveal that Yuri often drank milk in her underwear, making the girls erupt in anger. One girl jokingly suggested that this must be the reason Yuri was so well developed, while another found Yukito's bluntness funny. Yukito, on the other hand, simply thought that physical development had more to do with genetics. As the laughter died down, Yukito suddenly noticed Yuri tensing up. With a shy expression, she murmured that if he wanted to sleep with her that badly, then she would be ready for it. The way she said it, even their ancestors flinched. Yukito nearly died inside, realizing that they were not on the same page. He had only meant that she would be sleeping in his bed while he took the living room. At that moment, one of Yuri's friends mentioned that SNS would be crowded again, though there had already been a lot of talk about him. Yukito was surprised, prompting the girls to explain that there were many things about him that stood out. Yukito said that he didn't use SNS or group chats, and one of the girls agreed. He didn't even look at his smartphone, making him rare. This might have been for the better because he might just be shocked by the content. Yuri claimed that her brother was impudent, so it should be fine. The girls agreed, claiming that they could just say whatever they wanted. Not long after, Yukito excused himself to head home. In the end, people loved gossip. Whether something was true or false didn't matter, it spread all the same. Rumors were like an uncontrollable monster, fueled by curiosity or malice. Whatever the emotion, it was fear. For those targeted, a deep wound was inflicted. Elsewhere, Hinagi stared at her phone, looking worried. That night, Yukito was startled awake by the presence of someone entering his room. As he opened his eyes, he found Yuri suddenly beside him, making him sit up in shock. Without hesitation, she began unbuttoning her shirt, casually stating that she would sleep with him as he wished. She then asked if he preferred her wearing pajamas or not. She wasn't playing, y'all. Yukito was left completely speechless, overwhelmed by the absurdity of the situation. The next day at school was surprisingly boring. There was no student council that had tremendous power, no newspaper club that wrote scoop articles that looked like weekly magazines, no discipline committee wearing armbands as they poured their heart and soul into ensuring that school rules were followed. In Yukito's daily life, something like that didn't happen. However, that day was different. As soon as Yukito arrived in class, the entire room was filled with murmurs and tension. Curious, he asked what was going on. Mineta and Mihu approached him, filling him in on the situation. Mihu showed him an anonymous online post which contained shocking and cruel rumors about Hinagi. The post accused her of having questionable intimate relationships and of frequently asking boys out, regardless of who they were. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room, Hinagi sat alone, silently sulking as the storm of gossip raged around her. Sakurai joined the group, informing Yukito that the post had suddenly appeared the previous day. This left Yukito wondering if Hinagi was two-timing, as she previously said that she broke up with the senior student. Meanwhile, Mihu was convinced that it was a hoax after all. Kamishiro, on the other hand, wondered if Hinagi was okay, as she would normally come to school at that time. The other girls tried to reassure Kamishiro, suggesting that Hinagi might be absent. Mihu was furious that Hinagi did lame things. Then he asked Yukito about what he planned to do. Just then, Yukito declared that the culprit was in the room. Everybody was shocked, not believing that this was true. Yukito claimed that he always wanted to say it. Before he could proceed, Kamishiro reminded him that this wasn't the time to be joking around. Meanwhile, Yukito noticed that the culprit wasn't in the class. In the first place, Hinagi was not the type to be the target of bullying, nor did she have any hostile groups. Yukito then suggested asking Hinagi herself, and Mineta pleaded with him to do it. Everyone in the class urged him to comply, telling him that he was the only one Hinagi could rely on. Having no choice, Yukito found himself doing exactly as he was told. He was also forced a printout and told to go, not only by his classmates but also by their teacher. Fujishiro forced him to get her coffee, giving him nothing but 40 yen. Just then, Yukito noticed that the house of his childhood friend Hinagi was nearby. However, he was banned from going there. Inside, Akane, Hinagi's mother, was busy in the kitchen when she heard the doorbell ring. When she opened the door, Yukito immediately bowed before her, apologizing. He presented her with a gift while declaring that it had been a long time since they saw each other, and that she was beautiful that day. He then extensively explained that despite his protest, his homeroom teacher forced him to visit. He swore not to disrespect his promise to her, and he would make sure that this kind of thing would not happen in the future. He asked her to forgive him that time, then he reminded her again that she was always so beautiful. He hurriedly tried to leave, but Akane stopped him, asking what he was doing. Akane then thanked Yukito for bringing the printouts and the gift. She didn't expect him to come, and Yukito quickly apologized for it. Akane asked if he intended to come, and Yukito replied that he refused but was forced to. He didn't intend to come, remembering that he once made a promise. Akane smiled, acknowledging his reasons. She wanted to ask why, but she decided not to go on with it. She was sure that Hinagi would feel better the next day, reassuring Yukito that he didn't have to deliver printouts anymore. Yukito acknowledged this, then Akane bid him goodbye. Meanwhile, Akane thought that if Yukito came to see her daughter, or if he said he came because he was worried, she would have been happy to welcome him. Just then, she accidentally dropped the gift that Yukito handed her. At that moment, she was saddened that Yukito didn't visit of his own will, even though he was good friends with her daughter. Akane then decided that all this chaos was Hinagi's fault, and she only deserved to be punished for it. She wanted to ask Yukito to help Hinagi and protect her. Even if it was just a parent's ego, she wanted to hear it from Yukito's own mouth. A long time ago, Akane told Yukito to never visit their home. He accepted her words without any objections and he gave up on everything. She could do nothing but wonder what happened at school. Her daughter, who had just started smiling recently, was now locking herself in her room. Things had blown over and this thought occupied her mind. Just then, as Akane settled inside the house, her younger daughter, Hiyori, ran outside to greet Yukito. She surprised him with a hug, smiling as she told Yukito that she missed him. Yukito asked if she had been following him and she proudly said yes and reasoned that she felt his presence. Hearing this, Yukito jokingly asked if she was a martial arts teacher. Just then, she asked if he came to visit her sister and why he didn't come to her room. Yukito couldn't tell Hiyori about him being banned, so he simply told her that he couldn't go into a girl's room. Hiyori thought this was nonsense as he was welcome anytime. Hiyori then revealed that Hinagi seemed like she was in pain as she hadn't come out of her room for a long time. She asked Yukito if he knew anything, but he couldn't predict why. Then, Hiyori suddenly shared that her sister was the worst and an idiot. She still couldn't forgive her. Despite that, she pleaded with Yukito to help her. He was the only one Hinagi trusted, and she wanted him to speak to her one last time. Yukito said this might not be what Hinagi wanted, but Hiyori protested and said it couldn't be true. She claimed that Hinagi had always been Yukito's love. Yukito was stunned, recalling that Hinagi once said the same thing. Just then, Hiyori smiled playfully, saying that Yukito loved her too. She then tightly hugged him before running off into the distance, bidding him goodbye. Hiyori suddenly stopped in her tracks, waving at him from afar. Yukito thought that Hiyori was very straightforward, making her a much worse enemy than her older sister. That night, Yukito tried to distract himself by studying, but the lingering feeling of guilt bothered him. He grabbed his phone, claiming that he just couldn't help it. He told himself that this was for Hiyori and he was simply a kind older brother. Just then, he called Hinagi and she picked up. There was exhaustion in Hinagi's voice, so he immediately told her that she needed help. Sensing the command in his voice, Hinagi asked what he meant. Yukito replied that he would get to the point. He would solve her problem within 1 week, and in exchange, she had to come to school the next day. Hinagi asked why he was doing this, so Yukito reminded her that if she were in trouble, or if she needed help, he wouldn't know unless he told him. He told her not to carry everything by herself because she had her family and friends who were worried about her. At that moment, Hinagi shed a tear, revealing that she had decided not to make the same mistake again. The previous day she was confessed to, and she refused properly because she didn't want to lie to herself again. She wanted to be near Yukito and support him without pretending. She only wanted to be with him. Just then, Hinagi asked Yukito if he would still help her if she were exactly what the rumors painted her to be. Yukito suddenly asked if it mattered at all. This made Hinagi cry hysterically. She didn't want to be looked at like that anymore, and she didn't want to be bound by the past. More than that, she didn't want to be separated from Yukito. She then screamed over the phone that she didn't want to be a vain person. She promised to be stronger, and she may be weak, but she would finish what she started. She added that hopes and expectations don't necessarily come true. She always gave up on what she was looking for because of the repetition. However, this once, she wanted Yukito to help her. Yukito remained silent, so Hinagi urged him to at least respond. However, he didn't, and he only told her to get well soon and get some sleep. That day, from the moment Hinagi took her hand away, Yukito didn't think they would ever meet again. The next day at school, the school was buzzing with gossip. Mihu stared at his phone with shock, refusing to believe that it was true. There was breaking news. The culprit who spread the false rumors about Hinagi Suzurikawa was Yukito Kokonoe. The students started talking about Yukito, saying that he was a childhood friend who got dumped. Another wondered if he was angry and insidious. Some also recalled that he messed with his own sister, painting him to be much worse. Meanwhile, Kamishiro thought Iz was terrible even for someone like Yukito. Just then, Yukito entered the room, greeting everyone with enthusiasm. Mihu immediately flashed the post to his face, while Mineta declared that she could never forgive the person who framed him. Mihu asked what Yukito was going to do, and he suggested consulting with the teacher. Finally, Yukito grasped the content of the post, and he immediately denied the allegations. Just then, Hinagi appeared from the crowd crying as she looked at him. Yukito tried telling her that he was innocent, then he ran out of the room in embarrassment. As he left, the rest of his friends thought he was an idiot. They then wondered what they were going to do this time. Kamishiro commented that this was the first time that he had seen Yukito act like that, being shocked and all. Just then, Mihu turned to Mineta, claiming that he just realized something. A mentally strong man like Yukito would never look at that SNS and be shocked. It was all a blatant imitation. He turned to Hinagi for confirmation, but she was still crying. She then composed herself, recalling Yukito's words. Don't carry it alone and rely on everyone. She knew that what she was about to do was going to destroy Yukito's plans, and it would mean denying one's resolve. However, she won't let Yukito carry her burdens, and she vowed to be stronger. Just then, Hinagi apologized to everyone, declaring that she wanted them to hear her story. She finally realized she shouldn't go back to those days. In the future, she would have no choice but to move on. Rumors about Yukito only continued spreading. Students thought he was a real jerk, having been caught posting and then running away. They also believed he liked sweet things and took plastic bags at the convenience store. Meanwhile, Miyahara, a boy sitting nearby, could help but think that these gossipers were running out of ideas. Just then, Miyahara busted out of the room, leaving the others wondering what was wrong with him. Suddenly, Yukito started laughing by himself, prompting Mihu to remind him not to do that manically with a straight face because it was disgusting. However, Yukito asked how he couldn't laugh at the situation. It had been a week since then, and he had been endlessly spreading bad rumors about himself. The real culprit was none other than himself. Day after day and night after night, the flames kept burning like a tank that was always full of premium fuel. Now he was the first scumbag in school. However, this actually made him glad because his loner status had now been restored. His frightened classmates hardly spoke to him at all during the past week, except for Mihu, of course. By replacing the rumors with new ones, he would make the negative rumors about Hinagi fade away. That was the real goal. He used his anonymity to take the blame for the culprit's actions. However, all that would come to an end on that fateful day. Just then, a boy named Miyahara Shuichi slammed the doors open, screaming Yukito's name. It turned out that the previous day, Yukito had spread a rumor about a girl named Satu Koharu, which triggered Miyahara. Miyahara was now grabbing him by the collar, ready to land a punch. Miyahara and Satu were childhood friends. Miyahara was in the track and field club in middle school, but after he felt like he had reached his limit, he faked an injury and used it as a reason to quit. For Satu, he was like a hero. She admired his efforts and gradually developed feelings for him. She also wanted him to remain the cool guy he always was. That was why when she heard the news about Miyahara's confession, she was unhappy. She kept insisting he return to his sport, and for that reason, Miyahara got annoyed and distanced himself from her. Seeking new connections, he met Hinagi and confessed to her. Hearing the news, Satu took initiative to prevent Miyahara from being taken away from her. However, the cost was high and she felt guilty and came to Yukito in tears and apologized. It must have been terrifying for her to see someone like him, who had nothing to do with it, being framed and slandered as the culprit. She deeply regretted what had happened and had even considered formally apologizing to Yukito. But as he listened to her story, he couldn't help but wonder if it was okay to end the situation like that. Unwilling to make anyone else suffer, Yukito realized the solution. Spread bad rumors about himself, and after that, spread a rumor that Satu was being threatened by him. Due to its effectiveness, Miyahara Shuichi, who was concerned for Satu Koharu, now stood before him. After all, the two of them were childhood friends. Even if they stopped talking to each other, deep in their hearts, they would always cherish their feelings for each other. Just then, Yukito smiled devilishly at Miyahara, telling him that it wasn't too late yet. He then whispered to Miyahara, telling him that his girl truly cried beautifully. Miyahara cursed Yukito, furious with his disrespectful remark. Meanwhile, Yukito thought it was better this way because the root of all evil was him, which made him deserving of all the consequences. As Miyahara's fist drew closer, Yukito smiled, ready to receive the blow. However, Satu suddenly burst into the room, screaming at Miyahara to stop. She claimed that she couldn't do it anymore, causing Miyahara to stop right away. Miyahara quickly apologized to Yukito, which left him dumbfounded. Just then, Miyahara kneeled on the floor with Satu beside him. He said that apologizing won't fix things, but he truly was sorry. Satu, on the other hand, apologized as well. Now Yukito sat before them awkwardly, wondering how this had happened. The result was different from what he had expected, but he roughly achieved his goal. This was why he stopped the apology to Hinagi. If the matter had just ended between Hinagi and Satu, Satu would have been guilty for the rest of her life. It was necessary to involve Miyahara no matter what. Just then, Miyahara gazed at Satu, and both of them smiled at each other. Just then, Mihu asked if the drama was now over. He annoyingly asked Yukito to explain everything from the beginning. Suddenly, Yukito turned serious, explaining to everyone that this was his revenge against Hinagi. He then smirked at Miho, seemingly hinting that he was a good actor. However, Miho was far from impressed, saying this was an excuse. He then asked if Yukito truly didn't trust them and if they were truly powerless. He then reminded Yukito not to get too deluded, thinking he can always handle everything on his own. Meanwhile, Yukito acknowledged it might be an unforgivable method for Miho and the others, but he had his own benefits from the situation. If it were framed as him spreading rumors out of spite for being rejected, the credibility of the information would be lost. Then, Hinagi's past would be off limits. But that was not all, as he had one request for Miyahara. Miyahara demanded him to just tell him anything, and if it was something he could do, he would do it. Yukito wanted him to rejoin the track and field club. Miyahara was stunned, wondering how far Yukito would go. Meanwhile, Yukito clarified that this was no kindness or anything like that at all. Among the sports club, the track and field club was especially pushy about recruiting. That was when he came up with the idea of using the capable Miyahara Shuichi as the scapegoat. With this, things would be smooth for Miyahara and Satu. Most importantly, the number of people approaching Yukito with his bad reputation would decrease, allowing him to regain his ideal introverted life. It was a perfect plan that achieved the equivalent of 5 birds with 1 stone. This was also a feat that only the strongest mental fortitude on par with Orichalcum could accomplish. After that incident, Yukito got a big scolding from his teacher. Later that day, Yukito ran into Hinagi in a secluded room. He asked if she wasn't going home anytime soon, calling her Zuzuzuchi, which only annoyed Hinagi. She reminded him not to call her weird names, then she explained that someone was waiting for her. Yukito asked if it was a meeting, then he advised her to go home before it got too late. However, Hinagi suddenly revealed that he was the one she was waiting for. She thanked him, but Yukito insisted that he had only done things that made people dislike him. Hinagi then told him that she hated him, leaving Yukito stunned. Yukito agreed that he also hated himself as he did terrible things to her. For that, he was sorry. It was in the past and no one could hurt her anymore. He should have noticed what made her afraid in the past, but in the end he abandoned her. He couldn't become someone like Miyahara Shuichi. Yukito then headed to the door, reassuring Hinagi that she would be fine from now on and that she would soon find a good partner. He believed she walked in the light and there was no way someone as gloomy as him could walk with her. There was a place that was fitting for her. Just then Hinagi pulled him close, kissing him without warning. Hinagi thought that Yukito's prediction about her was too far away. In the past he was always beside her, but now he was so far out of reach. Yukito stuttered, but Hinagi pressed on. She shared that on that fateful day the light inside her went out. It was cold and she chased after Yukito's warmth. Just then she asked why he thought she attended the same school as him. It was all because of his mother who told her. Hinagi suddenly wondered if Yuri would have told her. Yukito was left speechless, merely uttering her name. Hinagi then asked him to come to her house. Seeing the resolve on her face, Yukito wondered what was in front of him. He wasn't sure, but this Suzurikawa Hinagi was calm. And so that night, Yukito visited Hinagi's house. As he observed her room, he asked how long it had been since he last visited. Hinagi replied that it had been 3 years, which brought back a lot of memories in Yukito's mind. A lot had changed since then, and Hinagi agreed with that. Just then, Yukito asked about Hinagi's parents, as her mom would surely be mad that he visited twice already. Hinagi bluntly revealed that her mother was home, which made Yukito panic even more. He could do nothing else but entrust everything to Hinagi. Hinagi thanked him for coming, but Yukito made it clear that he only came because she asked. When Yukito asked her about what she wanted, Hinagi thought of her sister, who had previously asked her if she had done what the rumors said. Hinagi suddenly stood before Yukito, telling him to listen because she had something to say. She told him to look at her body. Just then she started taking off her clothes, and before long she was bare before Yukito. He was too stunned to even react. Yukito's riz is so good, girls couldn't help but strip for him. Hinagi stood uncomfortably before Yukito, unsure what to say. Yukito told her to come to her senses, but she refused. She explained that back then she was in the wrong, but now she knew what she was doing. All this time she regretted what she did to Yukito. Her sister started giving her the cold shoulder, and even her parents scolded her. Since that fateful day, she cried herself to sleep every night. The reason for all this was that she knew she had hurt him. At that moment, Hinagi pleaded with Yukito not to look away. She then revealed that she had never been intimate with her ex-boyfriend. Back then, Hinagi's ex-boyfriend approached her, asking if she wanted to go out with him. He was a boy who was older than her, and she didn't even know his name. She was embarrassed with his confession, but it came at just the right time. Hinagi was quick to tell Yukito that a senior boy confessed to her the previous day, but Yukito was only silent. No matter how many times she approached Yukito, he had always been indifferent. She had never even seen him laugh. However, this was starting to annoy and frustrate her, so she decided to finally do cowardly things. When Hinagi told Yukito about the senior guy's confession, she expected him to be anxious and confess his feelings for her. However, he only told her nonchalantly that he was happy for her. As soon as Hinagi came home, she slammed her bag on the floor, frustrated that it was that easy for Yukito to let her go. It really seemed like he didn't care if she was dating another guy. She was extremely sad and her mind was a mess. However, Hinagi didn't let this discourage her, and she decided to create another way for Yukito to be jealous. What she did after that left her disgusted at herself. Her mistakes swiftly turned into regrets. Yukito soon confessed to Hinagi, revealing that he had always loved her. He was planning to confess his feelings during the summer festival, but he was too late. However, Yukito took this back, clarifying that he was never the right partner for her. He was arrogant and misunderstood when he thought they had mutual feelings. That kind of thing was something he shouldn't even think about. Then, out of nowhere, Yukito dashed away. Hinagi tried calling him, trying to say that she loved him too. She wanted to chase after him and respond to his love, but now she had a relationship with the senior guy. If she didn't clear up the misunderstandings soon, the repercussions might be dire. Hinagi had dated the guy for 2 weeks, and of course they were nothing like a couple. Since she knew of Yukito's feelings, everything seemed like a waste of time. One day, as she was lost in thought, her boyfriend snapped and asked her how long she was going to waste his time. He then grabbed Hinagi's face, forcing a kiss. Furious, Hinagi slapped him and ran away. That day she felt nauseous and she couldn't believe what just happened. She cried hysterically as she only wanted to do those intimate moments with Yukito. Just then, she received a text from her boyfriend, telling her that they had broken up. After that, rumors that she had been intimate with him started spreading. Hinagi knew that her ex-boyfriend did it to take revenge on her because she broke up with him. The rumors quickly spread since high school students view this kind of story as entertainment. She desperately tried denying it, but only those close to her believed her. Whenever Hinagi walked in the corridors, the students were quick to talk about her. The worst part was that she was the same and she didn't even like the guy or acknowledge his confession. She didn't even know what it was like to date. But then again, she was just as horrible because she took advantage of the situation. She was a horrible person too. This made her wonder what it meant to date, as it only seemed like a contract. The rumor soon reached her family and she could see nothing but the disgust in her sister's eyes. It was also the first time that she had been scolded by her parents. Back then, her mother asked if Yukito knew, but Hinagi couldn't say anything. The person she liked the most wouldn't want to hear about the issue. This rumor was a lie and she didn't want him to believe it. But how could he not be aware of what people said about her? Hinagi realized that she must tell him the truth as soon as possible. However, when she tried telling him the truth, Yukito only sneered at her and told her not to touch him. She was stunned, as she had never seen Yukito react like this. Her legs trembled at the sight of Yukito's reaction and she was just motionless. Little by little, the rumor about her became a common fact, and soon after, her relationship with Yukito disappeared. All of this was her fault. However, she understood that even without this incident, her arrogance would still have hurt Yukito sooner or later. Yukito was always there for her and he always listened carefully to what she had to say, no matter how trivial. However, back at the festival, she pushed his hand away. But Yukito, being himself, was always there to help her. At present, Hinagi pleaded with Yukito to put an end to their regrets. She then cried out that she always liked him. As Yukito remained silent, Hinagi pressed on, saying that it took her so long to confess a simple thing, but now she wanted to prove it. Just then, Hinagi embraced Yukito, telling him that she would give her entire self to him. With this, they both fell on the bed. Hinagi revealed that she had waited for this for so long. She was also a bit apologetic as she imagined this moment to be more romantic. She then smiled as she hovered over Yukito, saying she never thought of having time to prepare for it. Meanwhile, Yukito gazed at Hinagi, stunned that she had a beautiful smile all along. This was not the innocent smile of her childhood, and she didn't have that grumpy look anymore. Suddenly, Yukito told Hinagi not to rush things and to calm down. He added that she didn't have to do this because it was always her who had stuck with him, not the other way around. However, Hinagi was adamant, saying that she wanted to do it. She wanted Yukito to touch her and not anyone else. Yukito suddenly freaked out, saying that Hinagi didn't have to do this to prove that nothing happened between her and her ex-boyfriend. Hinagi replied that he was wrong, as the truth was that she was only happy to be with him. Hinagi then grabbed Yukito's hand, placing it on her chest. Well, folks, the censors forgot to show up today. Yukito felt Hinagi's heartbeat, yet he still couldn't say anything. Hinagi then recalled that back when they were kids, they were always connected like that. Yukito was surprised when he remembered that back then, they were able to understand each other even without saying a word. Now they were trying to retie the knot of the thread they had cut. It was still weak, yet Yukito felt like their bond was starting to reconnect. However, he found himself asking why all of this happened now. Hinagi replied that she was too much of a coward to admit her feelings before. This didn't satisfy Yukito, and he hysterically asked again why Hinagi only said it now. Panicked, Hinagi replied that she had to act before everything was too late. This made her worry, prompting her to ask if everything was too late after all. Yukito argued that he was sure he would have accepted her feelings back then, but now he was left clueless. That one fateful day always crossed his mind, and on that day he was convinced that she no longer wanted him. He was chasing something that he couldn't even reach, and he decided to give up on that feeling. Yukito couldn't accept her feelings even after all she had done for him. His miserable self didn't suit a pretty girl like Hinagi. Yukito was troubled with his thoughts, knowing he couldn't ruin Hinagi by being intimate with her. Like always, he might just break something without meaning to. Yukito then imagined himself as a demon king who took over half the world. He wondered if he truly was that kind of person, someone who had always been broken, but he then wondered if the feelings of others, which he had always misunderstood, weren't wrong after all. Yukito closed his eyes as he blocked out those thoughts, convinced that he had done something terrible. As he was lost in thought, Hinagi hysterically called him, asking if he were okay because he seemed very pale. Meanwhile, Yukito thought that Hinagi's feelings were crashing over him like a wave. It felt warm, like he could feel his emotions about to spill over, yet he couldn't let go. However, he couldn't help but wonder why it was so easy for Hinagi to strip before him. And most of all, how could she only tell him this now? Yukito didn't want to be misunderstood, but it was too late because he was already broken. He didn't want to hurt other people's feelings, yet he ended up suffering every time. It was too much and he couldn't take it anymore. He was also convinced that other people wanted him to disappear. There was no point in living and he could only wish to end everything himself. Just then, Yukito realized that this was the perfect plan, disappearing. As Yukito was lost in thought, Hinagi suddenly kissed him, tears flowing down her cheeks. Hinagi said everything was okay now, as she was never going to hurt him again. Seeing her tears, Yukito wondered why she was crying and what made her sad. However, Yukito suddenly fell into a crisis, reminding himself not to misinterpret Hinagi's actions. Just then, Yukito called Hinagi by her first name, which made her cry tears of joy. He had finally said her name out loud. She then said that her first and second kisses were given to Yukito, and she seemed happy about it. As Yukito looked at her, he desperately wanted her to stop smiling. He wanted that thought out of his head. Just then, Hinagi embraced him, swearing to be honest from now on. She then said that the childhood friend was always the losing heroine, or so they say. However, she didn't want to give up on him. She didn't want to hurt Yukito, so every hurtful experience would end there. She had always been eaten by evil thoughts and she lost her mind. However, it was fine because she didn't even care about anything. However, Hinagi was now telling Yukito she loved him very much. As Yukito listened, he didn't want to think that her smile and words were lies. That night, Yukito walked home in the rain. He asked himself how long he had been like this. He was the one who set up an end run with one out and a runner on first base without hesitation. This was all too true, but he couldn't remember when he became that kind of person. Biases, tendencies. It seemed like there was something wrong. It felt like his vision was being distorted. Why didn't he notice it? Why didn't he try to question it? He thought his mind was as strong as aramid fiber, but how long had he been like this? This left him wondering who he truly was. Imagine being pressured to bang someone that you start crashing out. When he got home, he had decided that he couldn't move on unless he got an answer. That was why he knocked on Yuri's door, knowing that he needed a different approach. Yuri was surprised to see him and she asked what was wrong. Yukito replied that he only wanted to have a chat, which Yuri found unusual. Still, she welcomed him to her room. Yukito thanked her and called her big sister, which surprised Yuri even more. She asked him what he just said, and upon clarifying that he actually called her his big sister, Yuri suddenly threw herself onto him for an embrace. She started crying hysterically, which startled Yukito. He asked himself what was going on that day, as it seemed like everyone had been giving away free hugs. If his mind wasn't like the unsinkable Yamato, he would be in big trouble. As usual, his silly thoughts came so quickly, but still he must move on because he didn't want to be stuck. He then hugged his sister tightly, knowing he couldn't just end up there. The next day at school, Yukito felt very exhausted. He never thought he would end up sleeping while being hugged by Yuri, and he was too old to tell others about it. He wondered why he would even say anything about it. Up until now, he should have said it as if it were a normal thing. As Yukito was lost in thought, Mihu asked what was wrong. Just then, Yukito randomly told Mihu that he joined the basketball club. Mihu asked if he were serious, and Yukito clarified that he would only join until the tournament. Mihu got excited and he said he would also join the club. Yukito suddenly went furious, reminding Mihu to stop following him. He sarcastically asked if he were in love with him, to which Mihu jokingly said yes. Yukito was stunned, while the other girls in the class started gushing over Mihu. Just then, Yukito approached Kamishiro. As he looked at her, he realized that she had gotten hurt just by getting involved with him. Yukito then asked her if a woman even backed out on her words, which only confused Kamishiro because she thought the quote was always about a man. She then exclaimed that she didn't know what he was thinking, but she promised to never lie to him again. Yukito acknowledged this, then he asked her to be his manager. Kamishiro was surprised, then she smiled and said she'd be happy to do it. The rest of the class started cheering, which made Yukito uncomfortable. Elsewhere, a rumor about Yukito being someone's woman started circulating online. Everyone was fussing over it, except for Yuri, who was lost in thought. Her friend asked if she had seen it, but she was too dazed to even notice. Yuri's friend mentioned that she seemed quite happy, yet her eyes were very red. Yuri then recalled how she cried so much the previous night that she fell asleep in Yukito's arms. She hoped to have finally reached that boy's heart, even just for a little bit. She had seen a lot of bad changes in the past, but for the first time, something good had finally happened. That morning, Yuri woke up to Yukito on her side, greeting her with good morning. However, she didn't want to waste this opportunity and she wouldn't let him be hurt again. Yuri decided that from now on, she would protect him. Meanwhile, Hinagi asked Yukito if she could also be his manager. Kamishiro freaked out, arguing that she had already taken the job and that Hinagi was too late. Yukito backed Kamishiro up, pointing out that their group wasn't even good enough to need 2 managers. We need this level of self-awareness. Hinagi's smile faltered at the rejection. Mihu, who was listening, said that Yukito was a little too harsh. Seeing that Hinagi got upset, Yukito told her that she could visit the team once in a while. Hinagi was very happy, and she ended up clutching onto Yukito's arm while thanking him. Kamishiro, on the other hand, was furious, reminding Yukito that she was his manager. While the 2 girls were bickering, Yukito was wondering if school or home could ever become a comfortable space for him. Just then, he called out to Mihu, asking if it looked like he was no longer a loner. Mihu was stunned by his question, wondering if Yukito had only realized this now. Later at home, Yukito's mother woke up from sleep, having no recollection of what had happened. Yukito asked if she was awake, then he mentioned that she had startled him when she suddenly fainted. Just then, Yukito's mother sat up, asking him to stay by her side. Before Yukito could make sense of anything, his mother suddenly hugged him, begging him not to leave her. Yukito then asked her if she had a bad dream. Then he offered to sing her a lullaby. However, Yukito realized that a lullaby might be too childish for an adult, making him resort to choosing bossa nova instead. His mother suddenly said that she didn't know why, but she had been having trouble sleeping lately. She then asked Yukito if he would sleep with her, just so she would feel safe. I think I've seen this film before. She hugged Yukito once again, closing her eyes as she mentioned that he felt warm. Her anxieties and fears went away when Yukito was near. It was as if his embrace brought warmth to her heart, which was easily frustrated. However, she was annoyed by the thought that she should be the one offering this to her son. Just then, Yukito called out to her in concern, asking once again if she was okay. His mother only clung to his shirt, knowing she couldn't tell him about it yet. She only sat there quietly, hoping Yukito would stay like that. Before parents assumed their roles, they were first normal people. Yukito was sure that there were many things that his mother didn't know yet. Meanwhile, Yuri asked Yukito if he had brought his handkerchief and lunchbox, acting like a mother herself. Yukito, on the other hand, merely answered yes to both questions. Yukito kept thinking about his mother and how there were many things that he didn't want other people to know about her. However, walking to school while holding hands with Yuri was now well known for sure. Noticing that he seemed nervous, Yuri asked Yukito if he was alright. He kept quiet, yet he could feel the heightened tension surrounding them. Since the scandal, Yuri's overprotectiveness had only grown stronger, likely a way for her to prove the rumors were true. She even made Yukito tie their fingers together with a string, adding to the strain. Despite his discomfort, he couldn't defy her, especially considering how much she despised Hinagi, viewing her as a threat. Yukito reluctantly accepted his role in maintaining peace, hoping to gain Yuri's forgiveness in the process. As they entered the school, Yuri bombarded Yukito with a series of questions about his feelings for her. Yukito answered with strange, indifferent responses, but Yuri didn't seem to catch his lack of interest. Instead, she believed Yukito was eager for her attention and told him to wait until tonight, needing more time to think things through. Horrified, Yukito tried to clarify that he didn't mean what he said, but Yuri simply laughed, assuring him that as his older sister, she would do her best for him. "Nani!" Yukito screamed as Yuri walked away, pleading with her to stop, but she ignored him, grinning devilishly as she continued on her way. Himura then approached Yukito, commenting on how well he and his sister seemed to be getting along. He mentioned wanting to talk to him, but Yukito was still sulking and refused. However, Himura wasn't easily deterred and dragged Yukito away, assuring him everything would be fine. Yukito, irritated, cursed the school under his breath, wishing for peace and silence. Later, Yukito entered the classroom, trying to stay out of the spotlight. Mihu quickly approached him, asking why he had arrived late. Yukito explained that he had been lecturing some ignorant third-year students and advising second-year students lacking common sense. Mihu then inquired about what he had been doing all morning, while Hinagi remarked sarcastically, asking if they were about to have a storm since Yukito was teaching common sense. Yukito snapped at her and she immediately apologized. He corrected her, pointing out the weather was both cloudy and sunny, which left Hinagi surprised by his literal response. As Fujishiro entered the room and announced the start of the lecture, Yukito found himself reflecting on the situation. He had always thought he would be disliked by the whole school because of his reputation, but despite the rumors, Hinagi and Yuri were slowly becoming more connected to him, which made his efforts ineffective. Yukito felt responsible for this outcome, believing he hadn't planned things through thoroughly enough. On top of that, Sato and Miyahara frequently approached him, which further disrupted his ambition to be completely ostracized. His thoughts were interrupted when Mihu suddenly mentioned the upcoming inter-high school tournament, asking Yukito what his plans were. Yukito, instead of answering, redirected the question back to Mihu. Everyone, even Himura, had been asking him the same thing. But in reality, it didn't matter much since their basketball team was small and lacking in talent. They would surely lose in the first round. All they could do now was to assist their seniors with their confessions. In the first place, playing basketball again was just Yukito's selfish response to Hinagi and Kamishiro's resolve. As he thought about them both, Yukito realized he had to change. He should have been happy when they confessed to him, but now he couldn't even remember how it felt. He wanted to give up and bow his head once more, but he chose this path because he wanted to regain some normality. There was definitely a clear difference in attitude between him and Mihu. Now Kamishiro was staring at him with googly eyes, seemingly hoping he would join the inter-high tournament. Just then, Yukito declared that he had a good idea. Mihu, on the other hand, sensed that he was being too sketchy. Later that day, they settled things in the court. Yukito told the other players to try and take the ball from him. If he lost, they would have to do the fox dance. Suddenly, Kamishiro appeared in a cheerleading outfit and some fox ears, demonstrating the dance steps. The game would end if they took the ball from him. It was quite easy. Mihu asked if this was all, but another student warned Mihu not to say such unnecessary things. Kamishiro asked Yukito what he was saying and he replied that he was just trying to get them motivated. She tried to argue, but Yukito told her not to worry and to trust him on it. Left with no choice, Kamishiro let him be. Suddenly, Yukito posed like a fox, saying he would like to see the others do it. At that moment, Yukito told the players that if they wanted to go to the inter-high, they must first beat their spoiled attitude back into shape. As they played, some girls nearby noticed them. Meanwhile, Yukito was having fun seeing the others fail at stealing the ball. Himura was furious, reminding Yukito that he was his junior and that he should go easy on him. Mihu screamed at Yukito, asking him to do it one more time. As they continued playing, Kamishiro stared at Yukito in awe. Without a doubt, she thought he was very cool. She just wanted to see him like that, even though she didn't deserve it. This was a dream come true, a lapse in time granted by good fortune. She then cheered the boys on, telling them good luck. Kamishiro knew that the important thing now was not to take the ball, but it was about what you do with the result. Yukito then turned to her, telling her to keep cheering for those pathetic guys. Yukito jeered at the boys, making Kamishiro wonder if he was teasing them. He wanted Kamishiro to cheer the boys on like she was a little devil, and Kamishiro playfully complied. Yukito didn't think it would work, as she was too big to be a little devil. Kamishiro was baffled, asking if this wasn't harassment. Later on, the boys were defeated by the challenge. Yukito teased, asking if they were going to inter-high like that. He smirked, thinking they were silly. To tease them further, he asked them what the meaning of silly was. Mihu erupted, reminding Yukito not to underestimate him. Once again, the boys got on their feet and tried to steal the ball. Kamishiro thought about how other people toyed with and badmouthed Yukito. She was sure his pride was shattered. But even so, she was sure he would become a very strong person. On top of that, she still liked him. He changed people around him through hard work and took them seriously. He also devoted himself to basketball in order to get over Hinagi. These feelings were so strong. However, this time she wasn't going to lose. She also wanted to be strong. Just then, she snapped back to reality when Yukito told her they were getting along pretty well. Yukito called her by her first name, telling her that the parts had finally arrived and that they would start the next day. He was referring to the precious watch that Kamishiro's grandfather gave her, which she broke on that fateful day along with Yukito. That moment was engraved in time, the moment when she took everything from him. She thought she didn't have to fix it and that she shouldn't even try to. It was a reminder of her terrible mistake. Yukito wished he had been better at helping her back then and he apologized. Kamishiro argued, saying it wasn't his fault. Just then, Yukito pointed out that she was making the table shake, which snapped Kamishiro back to her senses. Kamishiro was born in July. Part of the dial was made from pieces of ruby, her birthstone. As requested, the time of the accident was embedded into the dial. Some parts were translated from a broken watch. All dial hands were aligned with each other and carefully blown to prevent dust from entering. Then the sapphire glass case was attached. All that was left was to put the back on. The clock started working, much to their delight. Yukito congratulated Kamishiro, telling her this was her watch. At the end of the club activities, he saw her holding that broken watch and decided to give her a new one. If she kept worrying about the incident, she wouldn't be able to move forward. He wanted to restart the time that had stopped. Yukito started stretching his arms, saying it went better than expected. Kamishiro started crying, leaving Yukito confused. He asked what was wrong and if she didn't like it. Kamishiro replied that it wasn't that, saying that she was just worried she wouldn't be able to repay his kindness. Yukito said it was fine and that he didn't need anything in return. She didn't have to blame herself anymore, and she should also move forward with her time. Kamishiro thanked him, saying she would treasure it forever. Yukito also reminded her that she couldn't be replaced or repaired. If she got hurt, she might be left with a scar that would never heal, so she better not make the mistake of cherishing the wrong things. He then caressed her face, saying he was glad she was okay now. This made Kamishiro cry hysterically, and she threw her arms around Yukito. She apologized, but Yukito remained unfazed. She was crying just like she did when she caused her injury. But now, he wanted to believe that the tears she was shedding were different from the ones when she was crying on that day.